There we go. We are live.
Welcome back to the 2021 Virginia Solar Summit. Bear with us. We're working our way through some of the wrinkles of modern technology. I mentioned it's a renaissance, but it's not perfect. So we're trying to get Miss Lora Strine, her audio and her video all plugged in, and we are actually moments away. So just bear with us. I want to thank everyone again for dialing back in, all of our terrific sponsors and our co-hosts and all the incredible speakers. If you missed anything in the AM block, we were recording live. We were live streaming on YouTube, and we still are. And you'll be able to access these things afterwards, as well as their presentations and even some bonus materials, including from our friends in the Commonwealth and the federal government, including US EPA, producing a lot of things, as you heard. They'll have a lot of incredible programs. They even offer free technical assistance. They have nerds standing by to take your questions. And it's one of the places, I think one of my favorite quotes of the morning is, somehow in this redevelopment space and solar renewable redevelopment, Congress has had an epiphany, and it had it a few years ago. And so we're stepping in with on the shoulders of some great work that's being done, including by currently now being led by our next speaker, Lora Strine, who's taken over the helm as the team lead at Repowering America's Land, which is one of my favorite programs in government and is providing a lot of terrific, useful, practical information to help people, go from conception to completion down this solar redevelopment pathway and all the sticky wickets that you might encounter along the way. So Laura, let me bring you into the conversation and test your audio. How are you? You're on mute now. Let's see if we can get you unmuted. It might be on your machine, Laura, if you click no, it's the Zoom mute. Kelsey, can we unmute her? There we go.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, Laura, there you are. Gotcha. And your presentation.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, coming through loud and clear from your mobile, and we appreciate you working through our technical difficulties. But we got you loud and clear now, and I'll just let you take it away.
Thank you. Wow, thanks so much, Dan. It's so great to be here with everybody. I want to thank you so much for inviting us to present at the Virginia Solar Summit. My name is Lora Strine. I work for the US EPA's Repowering America's Land initiative. And I want to say hello to Vince and all of the Virginia Brownfields and the Virginia Pollinator folks. It's so great to see you today. I was listening to most of the conversation earlier today and just super impressed with all the progress that is being made in Virginia. And I'm actually calling here from Arlington, where I live. So that's exciting because this is my home state now. So I wanted to do a quick pop quiz before we get started. I wanted to ask the participants if in the chat as we go along, they can answer 2 questions after lunch. I figured we'd do a little wake up. The first question is, what is the state with the most number of renewable energy sites already developed on brownfields? And the second question is, how many sites have been developed in Virginia? So the first question is, what is the state with the most number of renewable energy projects on brownfields? And the second is, how many sites have been developed in Virginia? You can put that in the chat as we go along. So this is an overview of my presentation. We'll do a little introduction. We'll talk about tools and training. We'll talk about benefits and trends, policy impacts, and finally, the really fun stuff, the project examples. So one of the things I wanted to clarify right away was I'll use the term repowering in this presentation. This word means citing renewable energy resources on land with perceived or actual contamination. And I know it has other meanings in the energy world, but I just wanted to clarify that term. So Repowering America's Land Initiative is located in the Office of Land and Emergency Management, or OLEM. Part of OLEM's mission is to encourage redevelopment of all kinds of contaminated lands or perceived contaminated lands, Superfund, brownfield, landfills, RCRA sites, mine sites, and many more. And OLEM has other programs that focus on broader topics of site redevelopment. You heard Patricia Overmeyer earlier today talk about the Brownfields program. Repowering America's Land is specifically focused on renewable energy development at sites. The Superfund program also has alternative energy tracking, and Brownfields, of course, has a lot of opportunities for grant resources. So this program ties them all together on renewable energy. We are very focused on the community at Repowering America's Land Initiative. And like Patricia also mentioned, we are trying to encourage development of renewable energy at formerly contaminated sites when it aligns with the community's vision for the site. So this is a good example of some of the benefits of redevelopment with renewables. I'll let you take a look at this on your own time. There's, sustainable land development. There's low-cost power, integrating existing infrastructure at brownfields or other contaminated sites, protecting open space, and lots of other benefits to the community. So that's why we promote this type of activity. One of the things that we focus on at Repowering America's Land Initiative is working with our partners. We've had great success recently with solar economic feasibility studies that are conducted with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. The Becker County Landfill is one of our recent economic feasibility studies. We also provided technical assistance to the Minnesota Solar on Landfill study, and we have provided technical assistance to the Colorado Brightfields Initiative, which is encompasses a state mapping tool, which is a really exciting mapping tool that gets into a lot of the detail on particular sites and screening for renewable energy potential. And in July, we had a really great webinar with our partners at Virginia DEQ and DCR on their Pollinator Smart program. I was really excited to talk about this because of my love of butterflies and bees and flowers. And those are just some of the great things that we get to talk about with through some of our outreach and engagement. And we also work a lot with the technical assistance for brownfields, the groups that are out in the field helping communities with their brownfields projects. So on to tools and training. We have quite a lot of tools and training on our website. I would very much encourage you to look at our website, and in particular, a very popular tool is our Repowering Mapper tool. This is an inventory of sites across the country. We will be updating this tool this year. One of the best things about this tool is that it's inspiring other more detailed mapper tools, such as the Nature Conservancy has Mining the Sun map, and the Colorado Brightfields mapping tool has more detailed information than we can provide in our national mapper. So you should look for an update later in 2021 of this mapper, and we will be reaching out to the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy and the Division of Mineral Mining in Virginia to help assist with sharing information on sites in Virginia. Our training is a really great place to start. We have 2 trainings on our website. One is land use considerations. This is a great overview of site development. If you have a team of people that you're looking to educate, say project leaders and site owners or municipal employees, this is a great way to get everybody on the same page with a basic knowledge and understanding of how to develop sites and what to think about in terms of renewable energy. And this is also a great place to start if you're looking for project ideas. It also covers a lot of cross sections of issues that are very complicated and brings them.
Uh-oh. Hang on, Laura, we lost your audio if you can hear me. Laura? Can we get Laura's audio back? Awesome. Bear with us for just a second. So there we go. Got you back. Midstream with great resources. Make sure you check out this website now. Your tax dollars at work, and will really be illuminating, puns intended. Hey, Laura, welcome back.
Dan, can you hear me?
Yep, we lost you hard about 90 seconds ago, but you're back.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Thanks.
So sorry about that. So our trainings are a great place to start and a great place to get an entire team on the same page. They cover a lot of crossover issues. This is a topic where, a lot of complex energy and land issues converge. So these are a great way to get everybody on the same page, learning the issues if you have a project that you're about to undertake. It also provides a lot of links to the rest of our website. So it's a great way to basically take an overview tour of Repowering America's Land Initiative tools and resources on the website. And it's free, of course. And we also have a training called Interconnection and Electricity Sales that will help get a little bit deeper into the interconnection issues and also provide ideas for electricity sales options for your project. So please check out our training. Okay, benefits. So there are lots of benefits from repowering sites. The tracking and benefits matrix are lists of sites where we list and analyze data from sites across the country. There are reports that are basically, we basically release them every year with updated information on some of the latest trends and information on repowering sites. We often collect this information from publicly available websites. If you see site examples that you know about that are not included in these tools and resources, please let us know. Send us your site information. Also, every year we produce the feasibility studies. Like I said, we did one this year on the Becker landfill in Minnesota. Please reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about the studies. And if you have a site that you're interested in having a solar or renewable energy feasibility study conducted at. We also share a lot of case studies. We'll get into some later on in the presentation. And we have a report on critical infrastructure. This looks at the issue of resiliency and how to power a community's critical infrastructure needs with repowering sites. And coming soon, we will be updating one of our most popular best practices documents. It's called Best Practices for Solar on Landfills. So we're working on that update now. Okay, completed projects. So this is a map that shows over 400 renewable energy projects, all on formerly contaminated properties. In total, the installed capacity at these projects is over 1.8 gigawatts of capacity. I was listening, very interesting, found it very interesting earlier to hear that we're going to need, I think, 4 times that amount of gigawatt installed capacity for renewables just in the state of Virginia going forward. So this is a great, way to have a demonstration and show that all of these different technologies are possible and that they are happening across the country. We have lots of great information. This comes right out of our tracking matrix. And you can see here that there are many different policy tools that have helped these projects along the way. We have the production tax credit, and then we have various state programs that were enacted along the way as well. And solar is one of the most popular technologies. Solar represents most of the sites across the country. Wind is also a very popular technology. Their wind sites are smaller in number, but they are much greater in capacity. And you can see here that the solar trends tend to be between 1 and 5 megawatt installations. We do expect to see more installations in the 2018, 2019, 2020 timeframe. The way we collect the information basically lends itself to having a little bit of a lag in projects counted. So, if you look at the trend, that's the most important thing. And over time, we expect the last couple of years to fill in more projects as we go along. So the renewable energy incentives and policies in various states are, really driving a lot of these projects. We have a lot of information on interconnection. We have a recent paper on interconnection and electricity sales, and a recent paper on the value of existing infrastructure for renewable energy development. There are a lot of really great ways to reuse the interconnection that often already occurs at brownfields and formerly contaminated lands. And this interconnection process to the electricity grid can be very time consuming and very costly. So there's a lot to consider, and we broke that down a lot in this paper and in the training module. The 2018 Build Act provides additional tools for local entities to use when redeveloping sites, and Patricia talked about this earlier. This is a link to some additional information. You can see that there is now an exemption for local governments that acquire these types of properties. And liability issues can be very, there can be a lot to unfold. So if you have any questions about liability issues at a particular site or just in general, please reach out to either the EPA regional contact for Repowering America's Land Initiative, which is found on the website, or you can always feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have. We'd be happy to help. Okay, on to policy impacts. So policy impacts are something that we are very interested in, again, because as you see, the number of projects directly relates with the longstanding policies of particular states. And so we are trying to gather very detailed information about the state policies in Massachusetts and New York and other states to be able to share that information across the country. And I was listening earlier today. There's so much great policy work going on in Virginia and West Virginia. And it may be the case that, there are some examples that we want to share from your state's perspective with other states that are beginning along different projects and policies. So we will definitely be keeping an eye on what's going on in your states to help share that information. So we've begun to conduct some in-depth interviews with agency heads and other key stakeholders in Massachusetts and New York. We've been identifying common features, and we've been using this information to help inform other initiatives such as the Minnesota Brightfields Initiative. And these are some of the great things that our stakeholders have to say about the programs. Streamlined permitting is really important. You've been talking a lot about that. And net metering is really important. And lots of other really important pieces that are pretty much already going on, it sounds like, in Virginia, but you might want to take a look at these. And if you have any questions for me, or if you'd like the more detailed information, I'd be happy to share that with you. One of the most common elements across successful state policies is basically leadership and the ability to have leaders at all levels of government and even outside the government to help foster these programs. So these are some of the elements of a successful state program. And it sounds like you have a lot of these in place, so you might just want to take a look at this. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so for the fun stuff, the project examples. So again, Repowering tracks and publishes a lot of information about completed projects. You'll find really in-depth information in our tracking and benefits matrix that you can find on our website. These are just some very high-level examples, but basically, if you're looking for a project example, we definitely can help you. So if you have a particular type of site that you're looking for a comparison on, please let us know. We have, you can see there are lots of different site types that are already developed. Landfills are the most frequent. Brownfields, there are many types of all different kinds of sites. And it's really less important, the actual numbers here, and more important that they are demonstrated as successful projects. One of the types of examination we're going to have going forward is looking at the transition away from fossil energy. There are many communities, you have been talking about a lot of this today, mine communities, for example, And Repowering America's Land Initiative has great examples of projects that are already existing that have reduced costs, reduced power costs in the communities, that have generated revenue, that have generated jobs, mostly upfront jobs, but sometimes long-term jobs in the communities. So we have lots of examples, and we look forward to working with stakeholders going forward on these efforts. For brownfields in particular, there are lots of really great ways to reuse brownfields, and renewable energy is one of them. And there's lots of different ways to incorporate energy efficiency and renewable energy into brownfields. So, take into consideration the particular specifications at your site. You can look at different ways to incorporate renewable energy into buildings. You can look at building efficiency. You can look at lots of different ways. So if you need examples or also inspiration, we're here. Please reach out to us for that as well. And this is one example of a brownfield in EPA Region 3, the American Public University System in West Virginia. It was a former contaminated and vacant property. It received 3 assessment grants, an area-wide planning grant, and a revolving loan fund grant. And now it has an active center with academic center and financial center with solar panels. And they are saving a lot of money on their energy costs going forward. We also have some examples of sites where we have performed screening assessments. The Mount Kisco landfill in New York is one. And, we're really working to get down on the ground level to help as much as possible with redevelopment of sites with renewable energy. Environmental justice is another focus of our current administration. The Norwood Landfill Community Solar is a great example of helping low-income residents with their electricity bills. And this is a former contaminated property. When they completed this project, they reused a landfill. They have provided solar jobs. They are providing reduced energy costs for customers. So this is a great site example in our Region 8 EPA Colorado office. So this is our homepage, and on our homepage, on our website, you can get to the Repowering America's Land listserv. I encourage you to please sign up. We don't send out many emails, but when we do, we will tell you about hopefully our new webinar on interconnection that's coming up in May, and lots of other resources for you to make use of as they come out. Thank you so much. And I guess, I don't know if there's a way to see the chat, but I was curious about how many people answered the pop quiz questions of what is the state with the largest number of sites redeveloped with renewable energy, and the question about how many sites were developed in Virginia. Do you guys have any responses on that?
Yeah, we got a few. Texas, New Jersey, California, a few votes for California. And then numbers wise, 6, 4. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. So the answer to the first question is Massachusetts. Massachusetts has over a third of the redeveloped sites with renewable energy across the country. They have had a longstanding program and incentives, and they have a lot of leadership in their state. So it is a little bit surprising, I know, to have Massachusetts come in as number one, but it really illustrates that you can really provide and have great incentives and produce these projects anywhere. And the second answer is 4. So congratulations to whoever got that. Very good. You have 4 sites in Virginia that we know about. And if you know about more, we'd love to hear about them. So please send them along.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, and I don't want to steal too much time, but just one question. You made a very important comment, which is that the number of sites isn't so much as the evidence of success on the different kind of subspecies of sites that exist out there in the broad taxonomy that is land use. And can you help us think about that taxonomy a little bit more? Because earlier this morning we heard that a lot of brownfields are remote and they're not next to load, but you mentioned that a lot of brownfields are near in and very close to load. So are they 2 different types of sites? Do brownfields of a feather tend to cluster together, or what's happening here?
Well, that's a really good question, Dan. I mean, it really comes down to site specifics, but our mapping tool is a great way to find out, if a site is near to load, or near to the, a grid interconnection. So I think that, there can be also battery installations that can occur, or off-grid off-takers for the electricity. If Virginia is thinking about manufacturing seeds, for example, for their pollinator program, maybe there's a farm nearby who could use the power. I mean, it really depends on what the local needs are. So I think there's a lot of need for electricity all across the country. And while it is true that there are places where the electricity is more expensive and more needed, I think going forward, we're going to see a lot more innovative thinking around co-locating and, electricity and energy needs.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Laura. A terrific presentation and really an unparalleled a bastion of resources, and I know that the work is ongoing too. So just bravo and kudos. I've really enjoyed watching the program develop as kind of this interagency collaboration. It's emblematic, I think, of a lot of the types of solutions that we're going to need to scale up solar and renewables the right way. And I just wish you the best of luck. And I can't stress enough to everybody who's watching now that Laura's available, her and her team, and they have folks kind of tagged in each region on this. So wherever you are, if you heard the conversation earlier about resources available for brownfields, it's true on brightfields too. The public sector is out there to help you start to walk down this very bright path. And with that, let me try to bring in our next great speaker. He has a tremendous amount of experience, Mr. Chad Farrell from Encore, on these types of sites, these species, these exotic properties, which I made a joke earlier, Chad, that brownfields are like a box of chocolates, which people who know me, I've repeated that many times for many years. I learned it from someone else, a great man, Charlie Barch, who I mentioned before.
Oh, yeah.
And you are, one of these guys who's been out there in some of these other markets, navigated some of these other programs. You've seen observed very closely, like Massachusetts, the run on landfills that they had with their program when the recs came out. It was a really good, I guess the best example we've seen so far of one of these renaissances come alive, thanks to constructive policy and to the point of no return. Basically, like I said, there's really no more landfills left of the right kind that we need for solar.
Yeah, we are. There's still a few left, Dan. We're bidding on one in Western Massachusetts as we speak. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Laura touched on it really well. State policy matters. Obviously, I think here in the Northeast, we do have, a bit more of a legacy industrial past that lends itself to perhaps a greater density of these environmentally challenged sites. We have greater population density. which I think lends itself to a greater number of solid waste landfills dotting the landscape up here. But again, it does really matter. The state policy helps, and I'd be happy to talk about a couple of the projects that we've advanced in our home state of Vermont. We're not the biggest market out there, but I think we've enjoyed some early mover status and some really progressive policy at the beginning of the last decade that really sort of allowed us to advance, what the public generally wants to see, which is reutilization of otherwise undevelopable land. And so it's a win-win-win. And, we were fortunate enough to recognize that early on. We did have to work with some of our legislative leaders to craft some of these incentive structures to essentially level the playing field. Because let's face it, these projects are more complicated and therefore more expensive. So there's got to be some mechanism to be able to compete with just traditional greenfield projects. So, yeah.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, we'd love to see that. I think we're going to try to share your screen or load up some slides for you here. And I love the pictures the best. Seeing the stuff come alive is.
Yeah, I guess I do have the enviable task of being able to show some cool pictures of some projects that got done. And, kudos to everybody in Virginia and West Virginia for recognizing this opportunity. I think it's going to be transformative for your communities, and hats off for jumping in. These projects are more complicated, but they're absolutely worth it.
Yeah, they're going to level up. It's great. But show us, please share with us the work that you've done, and you've helped literally blaze this trail.
Sure. Let me see if I can pull this up. Can you all see this?
It's in. I can see the whole PowerPoint.
How about now?
There we go. Beautiful.
Okay.
Already starting off beautiful.
Great. So yeah, Dan asked me to talk about some redevelopment successes that we've had. I'm going to focus on a couple solar projects that we've done on capped landfills here in Vermont, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Just a quick level setting background on who we are. We're based again here in the Vermont market, good early mover market. We're a community scale solar developer and construction company. EPC is engineer, procure, and construct. So we get to build the projects that we originate. We do have a focus on these underutilized properties. I've got some statistics below talking about how many landfills and brownfield sites we've done, but we've also done a number of rooftop projects and parking canopy projects as well. Again, trying to, just extract the most value out of any one particular piece of real estate with renewables. I think another aspect to our business that I'm particularly proud of is we became a certified benefit corporation in 2016, and that kind of drives our values, right? It's all about establishing a triple bottom line approach to our work and to our projects. So not only are we concerned with the economic bottom line, because if the project doesn't cash flow, it doesn't get built, but we're very engaged around the social and environmental aspects of the work that we get to do. Wanted to, this photo here, with all the talk about pollinators in this 3-day conference, which is fantastic, wanted to just highlight that is absolutely something that we've been focused on over the last 3 or 4 years. This particular project has a mature pollinator population, and I really think pollinators, they're fantastic, right? I mean, we need to protect these organisms. They're key to our future food security, but they're also, I mean, it's just beautiful, and they also help us to sort of mitigate the concern that people may have of putting a big solar project in their community. What actually happens is the pollinators take hold, and the agricultural production, folks' gardens, fruit trees, the production just goes crazy. So just wanted to throw that in there, and I'm glad to see you all focusing on that important aspect of dual use that we can bring to the table here. But the developer's role, what do we do? Mostly we're out there identifying and originating the project locations. So we need to execute site control. We need to get landowners comfortable that placing a solar project on a brownfield or landfill piece of property, is not as risky as it sounds. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox to control that risk, whether that be environmental insurance, regulatory programs that encourage this form of redevelopment, as Lora was speaking about. But really, it's trying to get our landowners comfortable that we can provide a net improvement to their property and not result in additional liability. It's critical that we execute contracts to sell the power from the projects that we've developed. So PPA is a power purchase agreement. We need to have somebody to buy the power, or in some cases, the aspects of the power. So a lot of markets have a net metering program. And so sometimes instead of selling electrons directly to the customer, we're selling net metering credits instead. Every market's different. We unfortunately still have 50 different energy markets in the United States, actually probably 51 or 52 or 53. So we provide detailed financial analysis. Again, if the project doesn't cash flow, it doesn't get built. There's a lot of risk mitigation work that we're engaged around. We're ultimately responsible for engineering the project and achieving all of the permits to operate the plant that are required at both the state and the local level. Then we would secure, once we have all those assets under control, meaning PPA, site control, all our permits and our interconnection agreement with the utility, then we can go out and secure project financing to go out and actually build the project. And then once the plant is operational, there's a significant amount of work on the asset management over the operational life of the project. So here's how we kind of look at solar on brownfields and landfills, just to frame the opportunity for all the community members in the audience here. Really, brownfields today are essentially consumers of community value. I have a number of issues here as to why, but mainly, there's just little incentive to do anything. And that results in, property tax revenue, reduced aesthetic appeals, and, constrained future redevelopment opportunities. Well, along comes solar development, and now we can, create producers of community value. So we're gonna, generate revenue from that project. We're gonna have, electricity savings for the customers that are associated with the project. And we're gonna do everything in a means that does not disturb or, exacerbate any of the existing environmental hazards that may remain on the property. So really it's trying to move from a concept of being idle, environmentally damaging property in a community to one that actually produces community value. So a couple of case studies. This particular project is a 5 megawatt project in Brattleboro, Vermont, down in the southeastern corner of our state. You can see that this landfill was not at all, geometrically laid out. So we have to work with a number of the constraints that the site provides, mainly slope stability issues. But you can see we tried to maximize the production on this particular project because the revenue streams associated with this project in terms of the PPA rate allow for a decent amount of energy in the summer months. And just some of the community benefits from this particular project. Well, it does provide a significant amount of lease revenue to the regional waste district that owns the parcel, that has allowed them to expand their reach into the community with additional services and programs. There are a number of schools and municipalities located throughout Windham County, in which Brattleboro sits. And this is what we call a virtual net metering opportunity. So we have a whole host of different customers that are going to receive net metering credits. And they're essentially, the way the deal works with the off-takers or the customers is they are paying 85 cents on the dollar for these net metering credits. So if they're getting $1 worth of net metering credits, they're only paying 85 cents. And that results in a significant savings on their electric bills over the 25-year contract duration. So we're estimating up to about $9 million based on, projected electric rates in the future. The project also throws off a decent amount of property tax revenue for both the state education fund as well as the town of Brattleboro. There's another project that's a little closer to Burlington, right next door in South Burlington. This is a 2.5 megawatt project on the South Burlington landfill. I don't have a sexy drone photo of this particular project because it's located immediately adjacent to the Burlington airport, and the FAA does not allow drones to be flying that close to airports. But I wanted to also include a few pictures here. I know there's been some discussion around some of the complexities associated with these landfill projects. So on this top photo, you can see how we had to design the existing landfill venting system into the solar design. And then you can also see, obviously, well, you can see these concrete ballast blocks here that form the foundations for the racking system. And obviously it's a closed cap landfill. The remedy is a geomembrane and 3 feet of clean soil. And as part of our permit, obviously we're not able to compromise that remedy or affect the function of that soil cap. So significant erosion control design issues associated with these projects, and then complications as to not being able to just drill the posts for the solar racking into the ground as we would normally do on a greenfield project. So, and we need to use these low tire pressure or tracked bobcat machines to move all of the ballast blocks into place. So it's just a much more labor intensive, time consuming construction effort. Again, gets to the slightly increased cost of a landfill project as compared to the same size greenfield project in that same location. And then finally, we have to encase all of the wiring in these stainless steel encasements. And, that again is due to the fact that we're not able to trench and bury that infrastructure below grade as we normally would do on a greenfield project. So just again, a little bit more complicated. So we're hoping, so we would advocate that there need to be incentives in place again to levelize that playing field. If it's all about the lowest price per kilowatt hour generated, these projects would have a tough time competing. So these two particular projects in Vermont, we worked with the state legislature who, Vermonters want to see additional sources of clean energy. They want to see sites such as these, which are called preferred sites in our state. Preferred sites also include rooftops, carports, gravel pits, brownfields and landfills. And so the general public wants to see these sites utilized. So the legislature, we work with the legislature to create essentially an adder. There's a modest adder that these projects see that traditional greenfield projects do not see, that helps level the playing field. And so just a few benefits from this particular project. Again, it's a little bit smaller than the Brattleboro project, so a little bit less on the property tax revenue, a little bit less on the electrical savings for the customers, which include the city of South Burlington and the school district. And again, significant citizen interest in clean energy. A lot of the members of the South Burlington Energy Committee actually helped us with the legislative lobbying work to establish that incentivization structure, which was tremendously helpful. But the real exciting thing to me is what the city's doing with the energy savings that they're securing. They've created a revolving energy trust fund which has allowed them to hire an energy manager, created a new sustainability officer for the city. And what they're doing with this trust fund is essentially rolling forward with the savings from the solar project. They're rolling those savings into additional energy cost saving measures like LED streetlights for the entire city and things like that. So they're really just leveraging the savings into significant additional savings for the community. So it's a really exciting project, and again, I think shows the value of the public-private partnership, and the value that renewable energy, and in these two cases, solar energy, can provide for these otherwise idle, unused properties. So I believe that is it. And I don't know, Dan, if we have time for questions and answers, or you just wanted me to run through some of those slides and get to show you all those exciting pictures. And
yeah, they're brilliant and beautiful. So what we're going to do is I'm going to announce a soft break for anybody who'd like to stand up and go get a glass of water or refill your coffee cup after all of the substance today. But we'd like to roll with Chad for some questions up until the top of the hour. We've got some bonus minutes here. So we know this is a big solar slog via Zoom and YouTube, so we really encourage everybody to stand up, but you might have us plugged in on your cell phone, your mobile device, and you can walk around with us. So Chad, we've got some questions. I want to come back. Some folks had some specific questions for you, like what was the acreage of I think the Brattleboro landfill, or the big one that you had?
Yeah, the big one, the Brattleboro landfill, that's about 22 acres of area that includes solar projects. I believe the entire site's more like 30, but we couldn't use every inch.
Right. Yeah, you got to kind of make it work there. Get creative. I saw over in China they've done Mickey Mouse. From, from the air.
Well, I mean, look, Dan, it's a really good point. Let's face it. Generating electricity with solar power at any meaningful amount requires a decent amount of land, and I think that's why these sites are so fantastic for solar. There's no other use. Maybe the dog park. There's no real other use. Certainly not a use that's going to generate this kind of revenue other than solar. So if we need big tracts of land, let's go use the big tracts of land that don't have any other beneficial use, whether that be agricultural, whether that be for housing, whether that be for other commercial development.
Yeah, we're going to need a lot more juice to power the drones. The drone armies are coming, and the flying cars and all the batteries. So we're just going to need more and more power. And a lot of it's going to come from solar. So why not use all these? We got, as I mentioned at the top of our broadcast today, 500,000 abandoned mines in this country, 1 million or 2 brownfields, depending on who you talk to. We've got 2,000 Superfund sites. Most of them are of pretty good size. And that's all just the stuff that we've counted on the books already. And as we've also mentioned many times today, it's green on green now. There's real money. And because of some of these first generation successes, like in Massachusetts, the laboratory of states at work experimenting with policy. A story that I can tell, Amesbury, Massachusetts, a little town on the north of the bay there, they had 2 landfills that they did. And I think one was like, again, maybe 20 acres, one was maybe 12 acres or something like that. Don't quote me there, but it's all cash. They're selling all that power, and the city is pocketing the money. And so, these sites, these kind of medium-sized sites that are nearby load, they're in urban areas. It just makes all the sense in the world to do these kinds of things. If you haven't turned it into a soccer field or right, something like that, for sure. Like that, Chad. So yeah, you working with policy. I'm not sure how dialed in you are on Virginia, and like they have new HB 1925. But what's your view on seeing these things really work in other states and the big steps that Virginia is taking forward?
Yeah, I think it's really impressive. Others on my team have dove into the legislation a little bit further than I have, but we've sort of been looking at coal country. I think coal country is going to provide a tremendous amount of opportunity for solar PV generation. Whether you're talking, the coal ash ponds that have dried up that can be stabilized, whether you're talking about the mine sites themselves. I think Lora was also talking about, being able to leverage the existing infrastructure of these sites. And, let's face it, to operate a mine that required a lot of electricity. So the infrastructure is there. They're bigger sites than what we have here in New England. So that's exciting. And really, I think, and then, it's just a bigger market, more electrical consumers. And I think you've touched on it just now, Dan, as we move to electrify our transportation fleets, our thermal, all of our building systems, we're just going to need more and more and more electrical generation. And we're not going to get it from large, centrally located, coal plants anymore. We're not going to really get it from nuclear, as far as I can tell, over the next 5 or 10 years. And, we're probably not going to get it from large scale natural gas plants either, many of which are being retired now. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to need a lot more energy, and we're going to need to be really thoughtful about where we site it and where we generate it. And again, I think that's where brownfields and landfills and mine scarred lands absolutely come in.
Yeah, we're really going to bring it in the next session, which is a great one, and dive deep. But I had a few questions for you on, slope. Seeing some of the great sites that you have and your experience working. What are the possibilities there, and particularly, of course, for the ballasted systems?
It's interesting. I mean, there's different technologies, different racking or ballasted racking technologies, or forms that we can use, but it's typically about 15% slope threshold. That's an improvement over when we started doing these projects. It was more like 10% back in the day, but there have been, some of the racking manufacturers have patented some technologies that essentially resist the ballast blocks from moving on a slope. Because again, especially on a landfill, with respect to erosion control and maintenance of the cap, we can't really, we can't terrace any of these. We can't dig into the cap. So it's got to sit right on top and it can't slide. But I think, there's improvements on that front. But that's a critical design factor for sure.
And technology makes things possible. You also showed the awesome erosion control systems. Stormwater is an issue, even in urban environments, especially as Mother Nature really starts whooping us on climate change. We've got stronger storms. We had, I'm here in Chicago. We had, it snowed for 11 days in a row this winter. Texas, everywhere. So we've got to be ready for these things. And I guess kind of final thought I'll throw to you. We're going to wrap before the top of the hour, but you talked about leveling the playing field, and we've got wrinkles on these sites. It's full of possibilities and profits for the people and the places, but there's stormwater and slope. But you're doing it. What can we do this? Can we follow it in your footsteps, Chad?
Oh yeah, no, it's again. I think you just the technology exists. We now have tools in the toolbox in the form of environmental insurance, and we've got financing groups that are comfortable with these projects. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. But what we need is progressive policy. We need, our legislative friends to really, identify this opportunity and work to craft legislation that encourages the use of these projects as compared to, and look, there's benefit for putting solar projects on farms as well. I mean, I think we can make arguments that, almost every farm has an underutilized 10 or 15 or 20 acres. But, in order to leverage, brownfields, landfills, mine scarred lands where there are environmental risks to mitigate, where there are additional construction considerations that need to be taken into account. Just having really forward-looking legislation that looks to incentivize these, what we call here in Vermont preferred sites, because that's what That's what the community wants. The community wants to see solar projects on rooftops, carports, landfills, brownfields, more so than they want to see them just sitting out in a green farm field.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Chad. And more folks are getting the bug, and it's bipartisan, as we've mentioned all morning. You know, people
Absolutely.
understand these sites, and on that, right on that note, we've really queued up. We're going to drill down on this right at this altitude. So thank you, Chad. Perfect segue into our next session. Let me bring Carey Kling into the conversation. She's with BQ Energy, who's a Terawatt sponsor. Carey, thank you so much. She's a business development director for BQ Energy, and they are another firm that's really blazed the trail. They've done as much of this work as anybody else in geographies across the United States and across the taxonomy, as I've described it, this world, all these species of properties and subspecies. They know all the exotic animals and like the back of their hand. Carey, come on in. You've assembled a great panel for us to start to drill into this issue more seriously. Oh, you're still muted though. Yep. There you go.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Great. Well, those were some nice projects in Vermont. That was fun to see those. So somebody has my slides there. Okay, great. So our panel is going to walk through the steps it takes to develop a solar project on a brownfield site, a utility scale project on a brownfield site. Next slide. So I'm Carey Kling. I work for BQ Energy, and BQ Energy is a renewable energy developer that builds exclusively on brownfields and landfills. We've been doing this since 2002. And here I provided a couple of examples of projects that we've built on brownfield sites. We have in upstate New York, we have a wind project on an abandoned steel mill site. You can see some of the scrap metal in the foreground of that wind turbine. In Annapolis, Maryland, we hold the title for the largest solar project on a landfill in the US. That's an 18 megawatt DC solar project that we completed in 2018. And I've included 2 development sites. So in Pennsylvania, we have a joint venture with Talon Energy. We're building projects on coal ash basins. We're still working through our permitting and selling the power, but we hope to go into construction next year on those sites. And I've included an early stage strip mine that we are developing in Montana. So these are 4 very different types of brownfield sites, and they're all great sites for renewable energy projects. Next slide. So the first thing to think about in terms of developing a site is really who's going to buy the power. Very few renewable energy projects are built on a merchant basis. Almost all of them have long-term power purchase contracts, and those are required to get a project built for the most part. So a long-term power purchase agreement is either 10, 20, or 30 years. And the typical buyer is a utility. This could be a large investor-owned utility like Dominion or AEP, or it could be a municipality or a co-op. And a lot of the renewable energy development by those types of utilities is driven by policy. On the map, the dark green states are all states which have a requirement for the utilities to purchase a certain amount of renewable energy or to have a certain amount of renewable energy in their generation portfolio. And of those states, probably half of them have a target of at least 50% or more of renewable energy in their portfolio. And Virginia became really stepped to the forefront became a leading state on that front last year, where they moved from having a goal of 15% to 100% for the large utilities in sort of the 2040, 2045 timeframe. So a major step change there for Virginia. So this map continues to evolve, and hopefully it'll all be green soon. Another buyer are corporate buyers, and you can see in this bar graph the kind of explosion of investment by corporate buyers over the last 10 years. And what you're seeing in the, by 2020 is billions of dollars of investment by corporations in renewable energy. And these corporations are either buying projects, they're buying the power from the projects, or they're buying the renewable energy credits from the projects. Basically, they are funding these projects being built. And they're quite a different type of buyer. So a developer could sell their power to these corporations, but it's a little bit different. They have typically have shorter power purchase agreement contracts. They're more in the 10 to 15 years, because that's about as far out as they can commit, in terms of their business planning. And it's also a little bit different selling to a corporate buyer, where it really depends on the state and the utility where they're located, how you structure those deals. But they're definitely someone that could be considered a buyer of a project. So in terms of whether it's a utility or a corporation, you really need to understand what it is that they want, what size project they want, where do they want it. Like a utility may want it in a very specific region of their territory. When do they want it? Do they want it next year? Do they want it in the next 5 years? You really need to understand who, it's your customer. So what do they want? When do they want it? And at what price? And I think in the last panel, there was a lot of discussion about, selling the cheapest power. And we really do compete to sell the cheapest power to these utilities. So it's a competitive process, and you have to manage your cost in the development cycle, as we'll talk about on the next slide. So these are really basic development steps. So you have to, when thinking about selecting your site, we think brownfield sites are the best sites. There's a lot of reasons for that. The land is already compromised. It may, depending on the nature of the site, it may be really limited in terms of what its alternative uses could be. I've been doing development for about 15 years, and I find these brownfield sites actually cheaper to develop than a greenfield site. And that's because the historic environmental conditions of the sites have caused a lot of environmental studies to be done. And you can do that research up front. You don't have to fund that yourself. There's already this huge wealth of information, and you can really have confidence that you're not going to be moving into a sensitive habitat, that you're going to be working on a site that you can actually build on. So in terms of pre-existing conditions, so you can manage preventing yourself from taking on any liability of the pre-existing conditions by a number of mechanisms. One of them is really putting some very simple language in your lease agreement with the landowner. The regulators are also, through their permitting process, I think that they also they don't want to disturb the subsurface. So, they're trying to manage those environmental conditions as well. And we'll work with you on designing a project that's effective in doing that. And then again, just your simple design and construction practices can prevent any disturbance of the subsurface. So there's ways to manage, disturbing the subsurface and preventing any liability concerns. So once you've selected your site, then you need an agreement with the landowner. Once you go into construction, when you get to construction, you really need a 20 to 30 year lease agreement with the landowner. And really it's 20 to 30 years because that's the life of the assets, the life of the panels and the infrastructure. And it's also the life of the power purchase agreements, particularly for the big utilities. They want these longer term power contracts. So you have to have the land lease in place to provide for that. But you don't want to sign a 30-year lease at the outset. You need a couple of years to make sure that your site is viable and that you will have a viable project. So you need a 3-year option in the front to allow yourself to de-risk the site, to do all your studies and understand what your cost structure is and know that there aren't any fatal flaws in your project. So a typical agreement has a 3-year option up front and then a 20 to 30-year lease. Another important factor in siting your project is understanding where you're going to interconnect to the grid. And Josh will talk about that in a couple of minutes. But it's very important. It can be very costly to interconnect to the grid. And we are trying to build the most cost-effective project possible. So you really want to be strategic in where you're locating your project so that you can have an affordable interconnection. So we'll leave it to Josh to get into that. And you want to start that process early. There's a number of studies that have to be done and it can take a couple of years. So you want to start the interconnection process early. You also want to start your permitting early. And we have found that the regulatory agencies in a lot of states are very supportive of developing renewable energy on these brownfield sites. And it's just really a matter of engaging with them early, and they will work with you through the process to get it done in a timely manner. You don't want to wait on starting your permitting. And we'll have Rick talk a little bit more about permitting in some projects at the end of the panel. And then selling the power. So as I said, you really, to build a project, you have to have a power contract to get to construction. And so it's really, I typically think of, you need at least a year to have some studies on the site done and understand what your interconnections costs are. You can have that first interconnection study done, and you really understand what the cost structure of your project is. And that will then allow you to determine what price you can sell your power for. And then you can go out there and start marketing the power, either through an RFP that a utility like Dominion issues, or just through bilateral contracts. So next slide. So then if you've completed all your permits and your studies and you've sold your power, then you can enter into construction. The construction is maybe six months to a year. And once the project is built, it's really kind of a minimal maintenance and investment is required. It's a very kind of quiet neighbor. In terms of investment dollars for the development cycle that I talked about during the option period, it costs anywhere from $500,000 to a few $1 million to do all those studies and get to the point of construction. And all those dollars are at risk until you have a power contract and you're ready to go into construction. So you really want to be sure that you sell that power so that you can recoup your development dollars. And in terms of capital investment, these are very capital intensive projects. It's anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million a megawatt. So a 100 megawatt project would be more than $100 million of capital investment. So that's my quick overview. And now I'm going to turn it over to Robin, who works for Dominion, and she's going to tell us about what programs they have for brownfields.
Thanks, Carey. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Robin Lucey, and I'm a business development manager at Dominion Energy. Our team works on the self-development of solar projects, which includes managing the site selection, evaluating the point of interconnection for PJM filings, permitting activities, as well as the various work with the various subject matter experts on the due diligence tasks throughout the whole development process. Some of the items that we want to discuss with you this afternoon include the Virginia Clean Economy Act and its requirements for solar development on previously developed project sites, some overall benefits to localities, and what a utility scale solar project development timeline generally looks like for Dominion Energy Virginia. On this slide, you will see a summary of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, or VCEA. The Commonwealth of Virginia has been accelerating its transition to clean energy through passage of the Virginia Clean Economy Act that became law as of July 1st of last year and commits the state to achieving zero carbon emissions by 2050. It establishes requirements for Dominion Energy Virginia to incorporate a timeline into its integrated resource plan in order to meet the VCEA requirements. It also incorporates a framework for a 100% zero carbon power generation mix by 2045 with critical customer protections around reliable electric service. For Dominion Energy Virginia, this includes solar as well as onshore wind. The VCEA mandates 16,100 megawatts by 2035, with 200 megawatts to be on previously developed project sites, which are also known as brownfield sites. Some potential sites in which previously developed sites is attributable to or applicable to include sites such as landfills, formerly mined sites, commercial or industrial sites, for retail, or even parking lots. One project that Dominion is currently developing is the Dulles Solar Project located in Loudoun County on Dulles International Airport property. The project will be co-located with the Dulles Storage Project, creating Dominion's first solar plus storage hybrid facility. We are very interested in working with landowners for additional projects in order to meet these Vcea requirements. And in addition to solar and onshore wind, the Vcea mandates 5,200 megawatts of utility-owned or purchased in public interest of offshore wind and 2,700 megawatts of energy storage by 2035. Per the Vcea, 65% can be company-owned and 35% can be through power purchase agreements in which third parties will also have the opportunity to sell us power to help with this effort. Next slide, please. Dominion Energy Virginia filed its first clean energy filing for projects for approval from the Virginia State Corporation Commission on November 2nd of last year. This filing is the largest slate of new solar facilities for Virginia customers in the company's history. These projects would bring 498 megawatts of solar energy to Virginia customers, which is enough to power around 125,000 homes at peak output. 82 megawatts are for Dominion Energy Virginia owned projects in which a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, or CPCN, approval is required prior to construction beginning for these projects. These projects are Grassfield Solar in Chesapeake, Nord Solar in James City County, and Sycamore Solar in Pittsylvania County. 416 megawatts of energy would be generated at peak output through solar power purchase agreements of solar generating facilities owned by third parties. If approved, these resources will help us meet the VCA's mandatory renewable portfolio standard, which generally requires that 100% of its electricity sales in Virginia be sourced from clean energy resources by 2045. Next slide, please. The VCA requires solar development on previously developed project sites and establishes a minimum of 200 megawatts. So as I said before, this includes potential sites such as formerly mined property, landfills, and parking lots. And this year we expect to include these sites, these types of land that's on previously developed project sites or brownfield sites as part of our annual RFP, which is anticipated to be issued in late April. Next slide, please. There are several benefits to localities when considering solar projects. In addition to an increase to the local tax revenue, other benefits include the creation of clean energy jobs, projects using Virginia and locally based suppliers, and the projects that would support a clean and sustainable energy future in Virginia. Some typical site characteristics of a solar project are that they're emission-free, they're environmentally friendly, the maintenance is low, and they are quiet. Next slide, please. In addition, we have also included what a general timeline looks like for utility scale solar project development. The timeline generally will start with the site and survey work for the project layout and take about a year to complete. This work is started along with the county permitting process, which can take as long as 18 months depending on the number of public hearings and potential deferrals that may occur as part of that process. Following the permitting activities, we would then go through our engineering, procurement, and construction, or EPC vendor selection process. Once the EPC vendor is selected, they will submit the land disturbance permit. The SEC regulates the construction of public utility facilities, so the company would need to file for approval with them to get a certificate of public convenience and necessity. This is about a 6-month approval process. Once that's approved, the facility would begin construction, which would last about 18 months before reaching commercial operations. Next slide. And I just want to thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to partnering with the communities in the Commonwealth of Virginia to power a greener future with renewable energy. So thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Okay, maybe I have one question for Robin.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I was wondering, it's great that you guys have a carve out for brownfield projects, and I was wondering how you were going to consider other brownfield projects in the broader solicitation. Is there is it sort of a soft preference, or is there any any sort of incentives for brownfields outside the kind of minimum 200 megawatts?
So, we're definitely looking to partner with landowners that, have, sites that are, on previously developed project sites. And, through the RFP process, there's going to be a, specific checklists that will show what requirements are out there for these previously developed sites. So we are definitely, endeavoring to meet the requirements, and, and if projects, exceed that, that's a great, outcome for the Commonwealth.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we might come back to Robin with some more questions, but let's turn to Josh, and Josh will talk about transmission.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Josh Berkow. I'm a senior electrical engineer at Mott MacDonald, working in the renewables business. But our power group, like a lot of power groups, it's transmission and distribution, renewables, traditional generation, and basically anything related to power. You can jump to the next slide, please. So everybody's probably seen a diagram that looks like this before. It's this isn't one that I necessarily made. I just grabbed it from somewhere on the internet. The transmission system is generally broken up into three sections, and most people have heard transmission and distribution, and there's this intermediate thing called subtransmission that is kind of like one and kind of like the other, but not exactly like either of them. So what kind of project you do and how big a project you do is largely going to be driven on by where you're connecting. If you're on the transmission system, it's regulated by the federal government. In the case of Virginia, the authority having control over the interconnection is the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland interconnection, also called PJM. And its voltage classes of 69,000 volts up to 765,000 in the case of PJM, and that varies nationwide. There's the distribution grid, which is always operated by your local distribution company, whether that's Dominion or AEP or a local co-op. Those are much lower voltage systems, 4,000 to 14,000 volts, sometimes up to 35,000 volts. It's really location dependent. And those are much smaller projects, but they're also regulated by the state government. So the process is a little different. And then you have the in-between stuff, which is subtransmission, which is an intermediate voltage, 35,000 to 69,000 volts. You can do larger projects, but you have to be careful because you might be regulated by federal, you might be regulated by state, you might be regulated by both. And these aren't clear-cut lines. I can find you places in the country where there is state-regulated transmission, and I can find you places in the country where there is federally regulated distribution. And so you always have to check first before filing to see which jurisdiction you're actually under. Generally, transmission is going to be larger projects, 20 megawatts or more, in order to justify the cost of a transmission connection. Though not always. A lot of brownfield sites have their own substation already, in which case you may be able to do a very small project that is still federally regulated and on the transmission system. Similarly, I've seen 50 megawatt projects on the distribution system. It just so happened it was a very beefy distribution system at that location, which is to say there's nothing very clear cut about this, and every one of these projects is going to be a little bit unique in that regard. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, you basically have two areas of jurisdiction: PJM, which is governed by the federal government, and the State Corporation Commission, which directly regulates the distribution companies. If you're in federal jurisdiction, there's basically two processes you go under: small generator and large generator, which just very straightforward. If you're 20 megawatts or under, you're a small generator. If you're over 20 megawatts, you're a large generator. The process is longer and more expensive for a large generator than a small generator, which you would kind of expect. And that's basically all I'm going to talk about PJM for now. If you are looking to build large transmission connected projects, we generally just say find a consultant to help you with it, because they are complex and use up a lot of time and resources, and we could spend all day just talking about that. But a lot of brownfield sites honestly aren't big enough to support such a large federally jurisdictional project, and so a lot of these are going to be under the state rules. In Virginia, and their rules are not the same as every other state, so you can't necessarily take these across state lines. Every state's got its own rules. You basically have three levels: level 1, 2, and 3. So small projects under 500 kilowatts, medium-sized projects under 2 megawatts, and large projects over 2 megawatts. And as we'll see on the next slide, the distinction between those is also not necessarily that clean cut. So next slide, please. So this will probably load slowly. It's unfortunately our standard PowerPoint presentations load all sorts of nice graphics into them as opposed to just popping them up right away. But generally, the process for going through interconnection is roughly the same everywhere in that, you file your application, you have a meeting, you do your studies, and then you get into construction. In the case of Virginia, and well, in this case, I'm only presenting the level 3 process because the level 1 and 2 are much more straightforward and simple and have fewer pitfalls that could bump into you. Generally, we recommend wherever you are, if it's a level 1 or 2, 3 interconnect, if it's a PJM interconnection, reach out informally to the whoever the regulator is to understand the process and your point of interconnection. As we'll discuss later, that is the best way to get information about where your POI is and what you think could tie in there before you spend a bunch of money actually trying to get a study through. So in Virginia, there's a pre-application process. There's a standard form you fill out. You can do both informal and formal requests. Informal ones are free, but there's a limit to the number that you can do. Formal ones have a fee associated with them. Once you've done that, you'll decide on how big a project you want to try to do, and you'll put in your application. The rules in Virginia don't specifically say that you need to have a licensed professional engineer prepare this for you, but I would certainly suggest that you have somebody in your back pocket if you're not having them do it, because they'll help you out of any situations you get into. The utility will run a screening study basically to see which process you should actually be in. And so if your project's small enough, yeah, you go through level 1. If it's interim, you go through level 2. If it's larger, you go through level 3. But they also need to look and see if your project has any dependencies on other projects. So if there's 2 projects connecting to the same line, they might be dependent on each other, and that could force you into the level 3 process if you're dependent on somebody else. Similarly, if the line that you're connecting to is already overloaded with distributed generation, that could again force you into the level 3 process. So as a 500 kW project, if you're the last one in and you're going to cause an overload on the line and they find that out in screening, you're going to go through level 3 process, as opposed to getting to go through the relatively inexpensive and fast level 1. If you're doing a larger project, you're just going to end up in this anyway. Generally, after screening, they're going to schedule a scoping meeting with you, which is generally not in person. It's usually on the phone. That is your opportunity to ask as many questions as you can that you didn't get answered in pre-application, both about the process, including the things that aren't explicitly stated in the process, as well as the whole configuration of wherever you're tying in, because most of that info isn't public. And so this is your time to ask the questions, find out what the system is configured as, and then hopefully guide the utility in a direction that is beneficial to you. As part of the scoping meeting, they're going to decide what studies you need to do. Generally, there's 3. There's feasibility, system impact, and facility study. And depending on the results of the screening study and scoping meeting, you may have to do all 3 of those. And that's why you see it says study agreement, utility performance study, have a review meeting, repeat as needed. So you may be able to skip all of those and go right to facility study, or skip all of them and go right to an interconnect agreement, or you might be stuck going through 3 studies. And generally, you're going to decide that at the scoping meeting. And jump forward 1, there's another row that's here. Once you're done with the studies, you're going to hold a construction planning meeting, basically to come up with, all right, how are we actually going to execute this thing? Get your interconnection agreement together, and then you're going to build your facility. The utility is going to build their facility. You're going to energize and test. All right, let's move on to the next one. So there's supposed to be one set of rules across the state. There's a statewide process. Everyone's supposed to follow it. But how it's actually implemented is going to vary from location to location. As you can see, APCO and Dominion really have a significant amount of the state, but also there's 13 electric cooperatives that cover the state, as well as the municipal utilities. And the municipal utilities don't even have to follow the state rules. They just make up their own. But the investor-owned utilities and the co-ops have to follow the state rules, but they're going to implement them slightly differently every time because they have their own distribution planning standards and their own construction standards that you're going to have to comply with. Additionally, there's always flex in the rules. So in the construction scoping, they're going to talk about what submittals you need to provide to the utility and when, and that's going to vary depending on the utility. Some of them are going to want more information than others. Some of them are going to want things PE stamped. Some of them aren't. And you're not going to know what those are until you have interaction with that specific utility. And so while the process is generally the same, it's the details that are always going to get you. And as you can see, it's you need to find out exactly whose lines you're tied into to see whose rules you're playing by. Next slide, please. So one of the things that you find out is that if for these distribution projects, there's not a lot of good information that's publicly available about the interconnection or about the distribution grid. If you're on the transmission system, it's public. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission makes it public. At the state level, you have to rely on the utility and have a capacity hosting map. Dominion in this case does. To my knowledge, they're the only one in Virginia that does, and that's what the image is on the right. So you can basically click around the state and look and see by color code how much available capacity is on their distribution lines. Beyond this, you have to file those pre-application requests to get any more information than what you'd see on this hosting map. And it just only covers Dominion. So even if you're in co-op territory, Dominion's not going to cover it. They're not going to cover APCO or KU or anybody else. The info is only updated quarterly, and it doesn't include projects that aren't committed for construction. So you see on here, right, there's an orange line that's, according to the legend, says it should have 8 megawatts of capacity on it. Well, somebody may have already filed an 8 megawatt request on that line, in which case it's all gone. But the time that you actually pulled this map up, they don't show up there. And so even with this map, you still have to go to the utility and ask for a pre-application info to see what is actually going on those lines, which is why people often refer to the interconnection process as spray and pray. Throw out a lot of it, especially for people who are doing true greenfield development. You throw out a lot of interconnection requests and kind of see what sticks. And in the case of brownfields, it's mostly you put your request in and just be prepared to downsize your project to what the grid can actually support within whatever your project budget is. Next slide, please. And one last note here, I noted you have to ask about what the queue date is, and that's because PJM maintains a public interconnection queue. So if you're doing transmission projects, or if your distribution project somehow got bumped into PJM, which does happen, then the queue information is publicly available. The stuff on the distribution grid isn't, and they aren't required in Virginia to publish it. So you have to go ask for it on a feeder by feeder basis. It's not like, New York or New England where that stuff's public. California, it's public. You can just go download it off the internet. But one of the things to think about here is how much solar is actually coming for Virginia. And this is why, part of also why your interconnection process tends to be spray and pray, because even if you had good queue data, the queue basically shows you that there is going to be more solar in Virginia than there is load in Virginia. And so is Virginia just going to become a net export of solar power to the entire PJM footprint? Or are a lot of those projects actually not going to happen? And the answer is some of the above, could be both. But PJM does a load forecast all the time. And you can see the load is not changing. That's the pink line. The purple line, on the other hand, shows what the PJM queue has historically been with the proposed in-service dates of these projects. And the stuff after 2021 is heavily slanted towards offshore wind, but still many of those projects could become real. And so is Virginia to become a net exporter or not? And it's a kind of, don't know. It is really a guess. And I see somebody popped a question just reminding the 3 levels of distribution. There is distribution, which is 4,000 to 14,000 volts. There's sub-transmission, which is roughly 35,000 to 69,000 volts. And there's transmission, which is 69,000 up to sky's the limit. Next slide, please. And yep, that's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
So, Josh, I have a couple of questions. Can you just give people an idea of how long the study process takes and about how much that costs? And maybe just compare the sub-transmission and transmission level, just to give people an idea.
Sure. So if you had to go through the PJM process, that could be a 2 to 3 year process just to get your interconnection agreement, and can be a significant investment of dollars. You could be looking at over $100,000 just for that. It is significantly less if you're in the state process. The state process is roughly, especially if you have to go through level 3, it's roughly 10 grand plus $1 a kilowatt.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, not $1 a kilowatt, $1,000 a kilowatt, my bad.
So
the megawatt project is 10 grand plus 20 grand. That's generally the fees that you would expect to pay on a distribution level project.
So I'm going to ask you my favorite question to ask you, which is there are 2 69 kV lines adjacent to my site. how do I decide which one I file for interconnection to?
Excellent question. Well, you can certainly file for both, depending on if you have to go through the PJM process. They let you do a primary and secondary POI. POI meaning point of interconnection, and so you can just file for both, and then at your scoping meeting you'll sort it out. You could certainly, if you're at the state level, you can certainly file your pre-application request, which either you do the informal one, but obviously there's a limit to those, or you pay for a formal one, and then they will identify the lines to you, the rated capacity, and what queued projects are on there.
Great.
Or alternatively, especially if it's transmission connected, you hire a consultant like me, and I can look into the PJM models for you and see at least what the line ratings are and what the queued projects on there are. And then it's just take a guess.
Can you talk about mistakes you see people making in filing for interconnections? That's something that you've seen people do, or they come to you after they've made a mistake, or?
Yep, that does happen. I think the biggest mistake we see is mostly at the transmission level. Is it's going to take a long time to get through, and if it's going to take 3 years to get through, the equipment that you're buying now may not even be commercially available in 3 years. And so, especially at the transmission level, just file whatever. It doesn't matter that much. It needs to be internally consistent and make sense. But if you've decided, I can get a good deal on a different inverter today, let me go update PJM, don't do that. Don't do that. Wait till you're ready to buy your equipment before you update it at the transmission level, because it's just going to slow you down and it's going to cost you money, and it doesn't actually benefit you. On the distribution level, on the other hand, you should have a good idea of what you actually want to use from an inverter perspective up front, because the process is going to be significantly quicker, it's going to be significantly cheaper, and the equipment is still going to be available. And the utility can be more of a pain about changing your equipment.
Okay.
If you do need to change, make sure you have a planning engineer on board on your side to help argue with the utility and prove to them that inverters are inverters are inverters are inverters. They're all basically the same from a performance perspective on the AC side. They have different cost parameters. They're different from an O&M perspective. They're different from an installation perspective. But when you talk about the aggregate performance of a solar inverter on the electrical grid, they are all effectively the same. They're made from the same components that are all made by about 5 or 6 different vendors. And then all of the inverter vendors just package them up.
Okay. I have one more question. In looking at all the congestion that you highlighted in the interconnection queue, how does that shake out for people? So not all these projects are going to get built. How does that affect people that have gone through the study process? There's estimates for what it's going to cost to build a project, but then the projects ahead of them don't get built. How does that sort of affect people in the queue?
It really varies. In many cases, you're going to get huge upgrade costs thrown at you, and they won't actually ever materialize. That's most of the
time. They'll estimate more than you
Yes.
actually have to pay.
Yep. Yeah. So on the PJM side, you'll get a feasibility study and an impact study that'll tell you have millions and millions of dollars of upgrades, and those will go away when you get to facility study because prior queued projects will have dropped out of the queue. On the distribution side, on the other hand, it does happen, but the cost estimates they give you aren't particularly good early on, and they don't often take into account prior queued projects. So in the distribution system, you are more likely to get surprised with a cost increase at the end than a cost decrease at the end. Mostly because somebody ahead of you actually became real and then they lumped you in. Whereas PJM assumes everybody's real and then throws them out at the end.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Josh. We may have some more questions for you at the end, but maybe we'll turn it over to Rick to talk about permitting and construction and some projects he's worked on.
Okay. So can you folks see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Carey. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I'm Rick Buffalini. I work with Civil and Environmental Consultants in Pittsburgh. Also like to thank my co-presenter, Abigail Wallace, who helped to pull this together. So I'm going to primarily talk about permitting and design considerations, and then go over a few case studies for you. Real quick, CEC is 1,000 employees in 26 offices. We work with a lot of markets that end up doing brownfield projects, including manufacturing, mining, oil and gas, power and real estate, and solid waste. So we've done quite a few projects with different developers in different locations. There are specific permitting and design considerations to be addressed on solar development projects on brownfields and landfills. Many of these sites already have environmental permits from when the facility operated. These may include solid or residual waste permits or NPDES permits, as well as dam safety permits for CCR impoundments. Landfills or impoundments may also be in post-closure monitoring care. Typically, the landfill operating permit will need to be modified to allow construction on a closed landfill. But oftentimes, the NPDES permit, if there is one, will not need to be modified for the proposed project. Because these projects are on land that was previously disturbed, there's typically less potential for impacting wetlands and addressing threatened and endangered species or historic locations, at least for the portion of the project on the disturbed area. If portions of the project are not on previously disturbed areas, there's typically flexibility in the design stage to avoid these sensitive areas so that new permits are not required. Just like any solar development project that's not on a brownfield site, you may also need approval from the local planning and zoning departments and on the aspects of the project you also need approval from local and zoning departments, and also probably a building permit for structures. Because solar projects are relatively new, you may need to provide additional information to the permit reviewers, both on the environmental and on the zoning side, on the aspects of the project that they may not be familiar with. So brownfields and landfills do present design considerations that can be opportunities, but there's also some challenges. The opportunities can include that these sites are often on large, or can be at least on large open areas, on property that is not currently being productively used. The sites may have existing infrastructure in place, including roads, fencing, surface water controls, and importantly, as Carey and Josh were just talking about, nearby electric grid connections. With respect to the regulatory review and public acceptance, we've seen a lot of support for solar projects on brownfield sites. Because some permits are already in place and the general support, the time for environmental permitting can be quicker than for a greenfield site. And then finally, the projects can benefit the local community or the property owner by providing local power for smaller projects, and there's potential grants for developing brownfield sites. There can certainly be challenges as well associated with developing brownfields and landfills, but fortunately the project layout can be modified to address these issues. Most closed landfills have a cap system that must be maintained, and some sites have slopes that need to be addressed, they're too steep, and there may be existing facility infrastructure that needs to be avoided. Depending on the type and age of landfill, settlement may be an issue, and brownfield sites may have contaminated soil at the surface that must be addressed. Some of the primary design considerations are addressing the existing cap system of a landfill and the existing grades. Depending on the type of landfill or CCR impoundment when it was closed, the site could have a soil or a geomembrane cap system. The cap integrity is a key component of a closed landfill, so maintaining the cap must be addressed. The other thing is that solar project developers often prefer the slopes to be less than 15%, so steeper areas may need to be avoided or regraded if feasible. The solar panel racking system must have a foundation to resist wind uplift forces. The solar panels are similar in shape to a plane wing and are subject to uplift, so the foundation must resist those uplift forces. There are two options for a foundation. One is a driven post and the other is a ballast block. Driven posts are simply steel posts driven through the cap system into the underlying waste material or soil. The cap penetration may need to be repaired with a boot to prevent infiltration. For some sites, we need to confirm that the post will not penetrate the liner system beneath the waste if there's a liner there. The post depth is designed based on geotechnical information of the material but the design is then confirmed by site-specific pull-out tests. Ballast blocks, on the other hand, are large concrete blocks that provide the resistance to uplift. They do not require the cap system to be penetrated. However, they are typically more expensive than driven posts, and with so many blocks required, it can be a significant cost impact. Some of the other design considerations to avoid on a landfill or an impoundment may include things like a gas collection and control system, leachate management system, surface water controls, and vegetation. But as I said earlier, most of those features can be designed around during the project layout. So I'm going to present two case studies on developing solar projects on former landfill sites. Both are in areas that you may not typically think of as suitable for solar power, and one's located in Ohio and the other in Pennsylvania. The project in Brooklyn, Ohio is 5 miles southwest of Cleveland, Ohio. This map shows the location of the city of Brooklyn in relation to Cleveland. The city issued the RFP for the project in 2016. The site's located on a solid waste landfill that's owned by the city of Brooklyn. The disposal area is about 40 acres in area. The landfill accepted waste until 2010, and closure was completed in 2015. The landfill was capped with 3 feet of compacted soil. You can see from this aerial photograph that the area is densely populated with neighborhoods and commercial development located very close to the disposal area. So the project was designed and constructed in 2 phases, with the first phase encompassing 20 acres and providing 4 megawatt capacity. The entire project has 12 megawatt capacity. Let me go to this picture here. Some of this design drawing shows some of the features that we needed to avoid. These are gas vents that needed to be avoided at this location here. And there are leachate wet wells and site soap risers over on this part of the site that we needed to design around. But this project provided, it used land that would not have been used otherwise, and it supplies about 5% of the electricity consumption of the 16 county buildings. One of the specific design elements of this project was that the developer decided to use a Ballast Foundation. So the ballast did not require cap penetration. You can see them here. It's basically these concrete blocks with the solar racking system attached to those. Because the project was developed on a permitted landfill, we did need to submit a permit modification to the Ohio EPA describing the project and how we would maintain the integrity of the landfill with the solar project. Not that this would be typical, but it's kind of noteworthy that we submitted the application in April of 2017, and the EPA approved the request 1 month later. So it goes to speak to the support that you can have from your regulatory agencies as well as the local community for projects like this. But I would caution folks not to plan on a 1 month review and approval time, typically. The project was constructed, phase 1 was constructed in 2018, and here's a nice photograph of the ribbon cutting ceremony. The second case study is at the Pittsburgh International Airport. There was a municipal solid waste landfill on the property that was owned by the airport authority. This landfill was built whenever some waste was relocated from another portion of the property when a runway was constructed there. You can see the runways here. The landfill is this red area outlined below. The landfill is 25 acres. It has a clay liner in the bottom with a leachate collection system, and it was capped with 2 feet of soil cover. This drawing shows the landfill disposal area, surface water control structures around the perimeter, a sedimentation pond, and leachate treatment plant at the toe of slope. All of this infrastructure needed to be considered in the panel layout. This project was also proposed to be constructed in phases with a total area of 17 acres and a capacity of 7.3 megawatt DC. Like the Brooklyn project, this was also built on land that was otherwise not going to be developed by the airport because of the waste disposal that was there. The power is going to be used to power buildings at the Pittsburgh airport. So unlike the prior project, this one used steel post foundations instead of ballast blocks. We did site-specific geotechnical testing to determine the required length of the foundation post. The posts at this site are about 9 feet long and were driven through the cap system into the underlying waste. Because the post penetrates the cap system, we did need to install a low permeability material around the post to reduce the chance for infiltration through the soil. Though not a particular issue at this site, we also needed to confirm that the post would not damage the underlying liner system. This detail shows the post with the bottom section below grade and the top section with the solar panel attached. This project also, because it was constructed on a closed landfill, did require Pennsylvania DEP approval. We submitted the application in January 2020 and received approval in January 2021. Construction is ongoing. You can see the driven post being inserted into the cap system. Here's the post driver, and construction is ongoing currently. So to summarize, with proper site selection and planning, solar development on these brownfield and landfills can have advantages over greenfield sites. They can be easier to permit than greenfield sites, and they can be quicker to obtain environmental permits. There's also less public and regulatory opposition, so they do provide both opportunities and challenges to develop. And that's the end of it.
Thanks, Rick. That's awesome. I'm just going to jump in briefly to announce our soft break ahead of the top of the hour in our next session. So if you would like to stand up, grab a cup of coffee, go ahead. But we are going to take some bonus time here for questions. And I think, Carey, you probably have some questions right now for Rick.
Yes, we do have a good question here is, Rick, have you seen any projects that have been built that then had to go under some sort of post-construction review?
Carey, because on the landfills, many of those sites are in a post-closure monitoring period. It's generally 30 years of post-closure monitoring after the facility is closed. So many of the projects we're working on, the landfills or the CCR impoundment, are in post-closure monitoring. So we do need to address the post-closure period as these projects are developed. So that review would continue to require things like maintaining vegetation, all the types of things that would have to happen at a landfill or an impoundment, even without this project.
Uh-huh. Have you seen a project that maybe, if it was anticipated that, it's some sort of brownfield site and there's already plans that the site, once it's closed, will become a solar project? Have you ever seen different standards for cleanup set because a solar project was going to be built on that site, or anything like that?
I have not.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. It would be nice to know, if that type of thing was going to happen. It would be good to know early on, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. If I can ask another question, I hear the bells ringing. What type of trouble do you see developers getting into, and how should we avoid it?
Yeah, good questions, Carey. I think the schedule is often an issue. And I think, like you had addressed in your presentation, that, being in touch with folks early, the regulatory reviewers, the local planning and zoning folks, being in touch with them early is certainly a help in reducing the potential for delays in projects. And like we talked about, the projects are sometimes new, so folks that are reviewing them may not be familiar with what they're looking at. So to help educate them and address their questions and answer their questions up front can be helpful.
Dan, I can keep asking questions all day long. Are there any questions coming in that we should answer, or can I just keep firing away?
Yeah, you can keep firing away. I'll ask you a question. Nobody's asked you a question. So first, thank you. This has been a terrific panel. And thank you just as a carbon-based life form on this planet for the work that BQ has been doing these many years. I actually, when I was a young attorney at BP, we had peak oil and then the bottom fell out. And so I kind of broadened after that. I started looking at end use more widely, and it was actually Paul's work when I first found, wow, solar on landfills. This is like 2011, 10. It really blew my mind, and so I don't know if I've ever told Paul that, but that's the truth, and kind of planted a seed that has led to us being here today. So sorry, that wasn't a question.
Great to hear though.
Tip of the cap, and you and your experience, I'm kind of in this end of the beginning camp. Can you just look ahead, this moment that we're in right now, and the wealth of experience that you guys had, and look forward, particularly in Virginia?
Oh, well, there's going to be a lot of projects, and it's going to be a very busy season for all the regulators and the utilities trying to make all these projects happen, and it should be fun. Yeah.
And what about you, Robin? Thank you. And thank Dominion for plugging in. We're so thrilled that you guys are on board, and, seeing everybody line up over there and get behind these new obligations is really exciting.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And I just want to say thank you to everyone and the whole panel, and, thank you for organizing this and emceeing this event. You've been great. And yeah, Dominion just looks forward to working with, everyone here and landowners, and just the continued development of solar. So we're really excited for this opportunity. So thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, we were waiting. These brownfields have been waiting a long time. Believe you me. Especially at scale. I mean, we've had a lot of brownfield success here and there, a lot of mixed use. The built environment's been changing, but to see solar prices come down the way that they have, and to see all these other things, the way that we can sneak things in into these redevelopments, like Carey, a quarter acre or half acre goes a long way when you're talking about flower patches or community paths or whatever, right? Let me ask you that, like, get creative. We've seen, dealing with slope, how you have to align panels, and, kind of the sky's the limit on this kind of stuff.
Well, engineers can solve a lot of problems. It's just a matter of money on.
Right. But if a community, I've seen very proactive communities put their wants and needs forward and then work together. There's ways, even adjacent landowners can get involved, and, this collaborative spirit that I'm seeing emerge in this space is very, very encouraging. The public and the private sector working uniquely together. And as we mentioned many times throughout the day, even Democrats and Republicans. So I'm super constructive. Thanks again, anybody. Carey, do you have any final thoughts for us? We've got maybe 1 minute before the top of the hour.
No, this has been great. And, it is going to be exciting in Virginia. There's, they've really kind of setting some standards for the rest of the country. So we're off to the races now. Yep.
Public, private sector, the utility, the communities, landowners, and all the professionals in between. And they're all assembled here today. So thank you. And hopefully bringing in some fresh eyes, some fresh blood to the Renaissance, because as I think has already popped up, and we're going to get into this later in the program, I think one of our key bottlenecks is just going to be brains. We don't have enough people. So all you young people listening now or streaming this later, I hope you're getting some really good ideas about what you could be throwing your professional career and life's ambition at over the next 50 years or however long it's going to take to repair all this damage from the Industrial Revolution. So thanks, guys. Thanks again. Really terrific. Just great from top to bottom. And do these guys know what they're talking about? The guys and gals, you guys are really on your stuff. So I appreciate your professionalism. And let's try to introduce our next. Well, let's see. I've got how many seconds left? None.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks again. Yeah. So let's roll right on into our last session with four corners around it before we open it up to our experts exchange and take even more questions. I want to introduce first Mr. Adam Wells from Appalachian Voices. They are one of the hardworking co-hosts behind this event. Their team has been instrumental in helping us put this together, and they've been involved for many years laying, excuse me, a lot of the foundational work on Brightfield's solar, but beyond. They're focused on the land and everything that's happening there. So Adam, would you like to introduce everybody, or are we going to go one by one?
Dan, it's whatever you want to do, man. You're the maestro here. It was part of my plan for this slide, so I can do it, but you're on.
Yeah, that's what I thought. No, you're the man. I wanted to tee you up. Take it away, please.
Well, it's not all about me here.
This slide is, please. And you know these folks.
I do. Well, most folks on the line here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about the Solar Playbook and what that is, why we did it in Southwest Virginia, and how you can make it work for you and your community. I'm joined by an awesome team, featured in order of appearance here, I think. Dan already told you who I am, Adam Wells with Appalachian Voices. I'm in our Norton office in far Southwest Virginia. Ed Gilliland from the DC area with the Solar Foundation. And then Nick Kasza with National League of Cities, and Elizabeth Marshall with UVA's Weldon Cooper Center. And we'll be passing the mic around, so folks, if you want to say a little bit more about who you are when it's your turn, we'll do it that way. Dan, anything else at the top, or are we just good to roll on?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. It's like you've assembled quite a collection of stars, and it looks stellar. So please take it away. Yeah.
It looks like there's kind of a smaller room here. I know who most of y'all are, but not everyone. Could folks who aren't on part of the planning team or are joining for this session just take a couple minutes to say who you are, where you're coming from?
I'm going to ask everybody to drop that in the chat, Adam, because
Sure.
we don't have the mic capability for that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
But please definitely jump in the chat, everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're interested, since we do have a smaller group, really interested in as much dialogue as we can have. We'll use the chat box to make that happen. Thanks, Carey. I forgot about that part. Okay, so here's where we're going. We've got a kind of a three-part play here, where I'm going to talk about a little bit about what the Solar Playbook is and why we did it in Southwest Virginia and how we layered things together to make it work. Ed, who is kind of playing the role of the technical expert who led the compilation of the playbook, will say what's in there and how you can use it. And then Elizabeth and Nick are going to tag team making the pitch for why this might be a good idea for your community and how the Virginia Soul Smart resources could be put to work for you. We are interested in your feedback and discussion, so we've got plenty of time there at the end for questions. But if somebody can keep an eye on the chat roll with the Q&A, and if there's a topical question that comes up in the middle, feel free to stop us. I know we're an hour 6 or 8 or something of Zoom for most people, so can try and keep it lively here. Speaking of keeping things lively, how about a boring disclaimer? Ed, do we need to say anything about this? This was left over from the last time we used these slides.
I think mainly just tell everybody to go home and memorize it.
Okay.
And, yeah, but so we won't cover it now, but just be sure to memorize it at home.
Yeah. If you can recite it at the third day of the convening, you'll get a prize. So if you get nothing else from this is one of the key things, is that what we're talking about today is just such a result of incredible collaboration and nested and layered collaboration. The key partners putting the playbook together were the Solar Foundation, the Soul Smart program, and specifically the Virginia Soul Smart program, and then the Solar Working Group. And we'll come back to these three players throughout the presentation here. Getting into more of what I'm covering, the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia is kind of the anchor entity for why this work started going in Southwest Virginia. Appalachian Voices is a co-convener of that group, along with UVA-Wise and People Incorporated. And then our planning team is made up of the other folks you see here: Pale Blue Dot, Nature Conservancy, Southern Environmental Law Center, DMME, and with facilitation by Dialogue and Design Associates. So just if you're wondering, what is the Solar Work Group? What it is really matters, especially where it came from. So I want to spend a little bit of time on how we got together. So in the spring of 2016, we got all these people in a room together. And the idea, this was the first annual economic forum for Southwest Virginia. And the idea at the time was really to bring together the region's leaders in economic and community development. And really for the first time at that scale, talk about what do we do as a region in response to the plummeting coal economy. And that seems like a no-brainer at this point, but at that point in time, it was really the first time that there is the political cover and kind of the just lived reality and economic reality that we as a region had to get together and work together to move ourselves beyond where we were at the coal economy, just because it was in pretty dire straits. So that was a very forward-looking meeting, day-long convening. And during one of those breakout sessions, the question came up is, how can we use the development of a locally rooted solar industry as an economic catalyst? And that was just, a small breakout group that really got a lot of enthusiasm. And that little conversation, which was in a locker room at the Convocation Center at UVA-Wise, turned into we had a next meeting, and pretty rapidly and organically that grew into the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia, with the key players I mentioned earlier. So we've cut a ton of ground since then and done some really great work that I'm super proud of. Don't have time to go into all of that today, but just to say that there's a lot going on, and this is just one small slice of that pie. So in terms of mission and vision, it's really all about being a leader for solar development, both in the region, Central Appalachian, the coalfield region, as well as across the Commonwealth, and really about that making solar work as an economic and a social catalyst, both in terms of the opportunities around solar itself, but then leveraging additional economic growth and social benefits as a result of that development. Really quickly here, we've got 4 goals of the work group. I'll just paraphrase here. It's to put up lots of solar that people can see in high visibility places. 2, while we're doing that, employ and train folks in Southwest Virginia, our friends and neighbors. 3 is to do education outreach at a community level, like at farmers markets and kids programming, as well as local leaders and even statewide elected officials. And 4, make Southwest Virginia in particular, and the whole state, if we can, more solar friendly at a policy level. And so where we're headed here with talking about SolSmart and the Solar Playbook really, kind of hits that 4th bullet of policy pretty squarely on the head, but ties to all of them. So this is a picture that we're just super proud of. This is the award ceremony where a Southwest Virginia SolSmart cohort got their solar panels there in July of 2019. And this wasn't the first statewide cohort for SolSmart, but it was the first one in Central Appalachia in coal country. So we're really proud of that. So you might be asking, well, what is SolSmart? And my colleagues will go down in a little bit more detail, but just for now, it's a Department of Energy funded program administered by the Solar Foundation and others in National League of Cities to help localities at the county level streamline their permitting and zoning ordinances to streamline solar development. And this is geared, at a high level, it's geared towards all solar. And what we're talking about here is looking at solar on mine land or brownfields. And so we went through the process in early 2019 and had that award ceremony in July. And that really led us to what do we do with that momentum? And we started high level at kind of looking at all solar, but then this question of, how do we look at the region's, pretty large inventory of mine land sites, and how do we leverage that and make it easier for solar to happen where that's viable? There's a couple of important challenges. One is that we haven't had any, at that scale, utility scale solar implementation happen anywhere, whether it's on a greenfield or a brownfield. So we had to kind of overcome that inertia and get localities the information they needed to land those deals on their side. And the other thing, and this comes up across the board with brownfields, is it's not as cheap or to put solar on brownfields. Kind of compared side by side, usually it's cheaper to put level a cornfield and put panels up. So we wanted to level the playing field and make it as easy as possible to put solar on minefields. And Dan was shaking his head about yeah, is it well, I can tell you the truth is that it's more expensive to put solar on a rocky hillside.
That's true. Sorry, yeah. I only shake my head because I just heard someone for the first time. Well, I've heard her say it in the past, but Carey in the last session said that brownfields can be cheaper. So it is possible, but you're absolutely right. There's more layers of sophistication and everything else. But, yeah.
And that's rapidly changing in the Brightfields Act, which I'm sure has already been talked about today, is an exciting way it's changing. So that's kind of the Solar Playbook was created to answer that question of how do we maximize investment and local benefits from solar, and how we do that, particularly with the region's vast mine land inventory. That was the tough technical question that Ed and his team took on. So that didn't just magically happen. There's a lot of really layered resources we had to put together to make that possible. So I want to talk about those layered resources. Wait a minute, it's a layered cake. Just testing to see if you're watching. Make you hungry? Here's our layered resources. So I already mentioned we've got the solar work group, and we from the very beginning had strong engagement from the localities long before we started the Soul Smart program. And so really none of that we wouldn't have gotten to this point with the playbook without locality engagement, and the trust that we had built with that group. So that led to the Soul Smart cohort, and really the momentum and the good experience that our county officials had with the Solar Foundation, with DMME, with UVA, and with National League of Cities, and just really saw those folks as a resource and kind of submitted them as experts in this field. So those are resources. Then we got some money. We got a Go Virginia, which is a statewide funding source, enhanced capacity building, which is their word for technical assistance grant, which helped bring some, just some dollars to this effort. Those dollars were matched by funding from the Solar Foundation via DOE and Soul Smart. And then the timing worked out really great, where there was the launch of the Soul Smart program in Virginia with the Weldon Cooper Center, with Elizabeth, National League of Cities, Nick, and then Carey with DMME all came together, and we were able to really, without planning on doing it at the beginning, we joined forces and were able to support each other in this work. Kind of use Southwest Virginia as an experiment, and then hopefully that will be a jumping off point, and we can replicate it across the state. So that's our layered approach. Wait a minute, that's a cheeseburger. With that, I'll kick it over to Ed to go into the details.
Great, thank you so much, Adam. Although I appreciate the food references, I especially like the references to the events with lots of people, because that just reminds me of the good old days when we used to all go to events and have a good time with everybody. So thanks so much for that reference. But we're not doing that today, maybe next year. So yeah, Ed Gilliland, I'm Senior Director of the Solar Foundation, and I'm going to talk about the large-scale solar development playbook. I should say that while this was done for Southwest Virginia, probably 90–95% of it would apply to other counties in the state as well, because it really does talk a lot of general things about solar. It does get into Virginia state laws and local planning practices. So, and most of that really would apply statewide. A lot of it would apply even outside of the state. So I think hopefully this is something that can be useful for many. And then let's see, so you're advancing slides. Yeah, we can go on, I guess, the next slide.
Yeah, just say next or whatever.
Next, yeah, okay. Sure. So the solar development opportunity, if you haven't heard already at the Virginia, at the summit, it's a tremendous development opportunity going on right now, nationally and in the state. Of course, in the US, we are faced with declining solar cost, over 70% since 2010. And at this point, about a little bit over 40% of all new electrical capacity that comes online every year is from solar. And the industry in 2019 was doing about 250,000 jobs. And we expect to have the 2020 numbers out pretty shortly here. Also, if we look in 2019, the state had almost 900 megawatts of solar energy statewide. And that's cumulative, the solar energy that was already been built up over the last 3, 4, 5 years. This morning, Vcea and Wood Mackenzie came out with the 2020 numbers. And for the year 2020, there was 1,400 megawatts of solar developed in the state of Virginia. So there's more developed in 2020 than the entire state had at the beginning of the year. So that's an incredible amount of growth, and now puts Virginia in 4th place in the nation. It was just behind California, Texas, and Florida. So Virginia is in a quite exclusive club there as far as the amount of solar development going on. Of course, the Virginia Clean Economy Act has been a big stimulus for the solar industry and will continue going on into the future. All right, let's go next slide. So our focus on this report was on 2 of the 3 market segments for solar. We looked at utility scale and non-residential. If you are more interested in residential, we can, the Solar Working Group has a lot of information on residential as well, as does SolSmart. But the focus of this effort was on the utility scale and the non-residential. The utility scale being the solar that feeds directly into the grid. It's typically ground mounted, larger than a megawatt. The non-residential being the solar that is tied to typically a business, or it's like a warehouse or a school or a data center. So the solar does support the load of the facility, but it's also typically tied to the grid and can sell excess electricity back to the grid. Next slide. Of course, you've heard in previous sessions and many times before about all of the benefits of solar, the jobs, the clean energy. We should note here that for many counties in Virginia, maybe that are struggling to get tax revenue, solar can be a tremendous stimulus to the tax revenue. Here's an example. Under one system in Virginia now, where a 75 megawatt project generates over $100,000 in annual tax revenue. So it can be really strong to the local tax base and very important in that sense. Also, what we've seen is that solar can appeal to businesses that want to perhaps relocate to your area or expand in your area. Those businesses may want to be powered by clean energy. They may have a lot of more and more businesses have a preference for being powered by clean energy. And so if you can offer solar, it can be an enticement for business growth. Let's see, next slide. So the report, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the aspects of the report. I won't go into the specifics, but here we do cover the solar development process from the developer's perspective. So even though this report is primarily aimed at local public officials, we want to give those people a perspective that the developer will have as they come into your community and go through the process of getting approved and financing and interconnecting for solar. And so it can be a pretty complex process, a lot of things to consider. And as the non-residential solar, it's a process that can take months and months, 3 months, 6 months. And then the utility scale solar typically takes years. It can take 2 or 3 years. Next slide. The key players, you guys know most of who these are, but we do want to touch on them so that everybody is aware of who the key players are. And so we do cover that in the guidebook. Happy to answer any questions here. Let's go to the next slide. So the regulatory approval process is so critical to local governments that are trying to work with developers that are trying to do solar. It's very important that local governments address solar in their comprehensive plans and their zoning codes. You really don't want to be silent on solar. It's you don't want to be reactive. If a project comes across your desk, community is in such a much better position if they have thought about beforehand what they want in solar as far as their county or city is concerned, what they don't want, and how they want it built or not built. So all of these elements are very important, and we encourage communities to think ahead, to do the put it in the comp plan, put solar in the zoning codes. Okay, next slide. I think we go one slide back if we can, yeah. So we wanted to, there are lots of other development considerations. Of course, in this summit, you've already heard a lot about solar on brownfields and these previously mined lands. There's a lot on power purchase agreements where a third party would own the solar, perhaps on a roof of a business, and how that arrangement how you can do that, and how that can be advantageous to both the property owner and the solar developer. PACE financing is a really good opportunity in Virginia. Stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, and it's a way for say a property owner to install solar, and instead of paying for it up front, they pay for it over time with a surcharge on their property tax. And so if typically that surcharge is below the cost of the savings that they get from solar. So in a sense, they're acquiring solar with no money down, and you're cash flow positive from day one. Let's see, go to the next slide. Okay, so what is the process that the local community or the local jurisdiction would go through, and typically goes through with solar? Well, certainly we want to set the vision and the priorities, what you want with solar. Then you're going to identify their barriers and try to address some of those barriers. And then perhaps you might identify some sites. we're going to focus a little bit more on these top three on the next slide. So the vision, the priorities, what are your main goals? What are you trying to develop? Are you looking for jobs, for clean energy? Are you trying to address the needs of various stakeholders and property owners that could be interested in solar? All of those are important. They're things you can put in your comp plan. What are the barriers that you anticipate? How about the public? How does the public feel about solar? What are their concerns? What about competing land uses? Agriculture versus forest land versus previously mined land. What can you, how can you target solar where you would like? And then what about the planning processes are maybe unclear and might present a barrier to a solar project? And then you can look at potential sites. There's a lot of discussions back and forth on how prescriptive a local government would want to be in directing solar, say, in your county. And we can certainly discuss in the Q&A, but suffice it to say that from the solar's perspective, a utility scale project, they're going to want to have proximity to the transmission lines. They're going to want favorable topography, which is generally pretty flat or close to flat. So, and then there are going to be obviously things that a county will want to consider, which is what agricultural or forested land they would like to preserve. Next slide. So in looking more at the number 4 here, the regulatory issues, again, the comprehensive plan is so important. Consider amending, if you're going to amend it, include solar. And if you're going to do zoning code, you'd want to put solar in the zoning code. Even if you can't, you might could do some minor text amendments, such as the definition of solar in your zoning code. Then you want to look at your process to review solar development proposals. These are not unlike other larger real estate projects where you do site plan review and various and look at maybe there's some compensation that you might want to get from the developer to support a related issue in your community. So there's a whole host of regulatory processes you go through at the local level. And then of course, there's a state regulatory process as well. And then finally, you can promote the opportunity for solar. Go out and talk about it at trade shows, when we can finally go to them. Go to at webinars, SolSmart. You can even issue an RFP. And if you have questions about that, Adam has a good story to tell you about that. So I think that's good. We'll turn it over to Nick and Elizabeth.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Adam. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit more about the SolSmart program as a resource and some of the other resources that we can leverage in conjunction with SolSmart to really deliver meaningful technical assistance to localities across Virginia. Next slide. So Adam's done a great job of giving an overview of the SolSmart program in Southwest Virginia. As he mentioned, we had 8 communities get designated in 2019. And through that process and through the engagement that happened before and after that, it became clear that localities in this region could benefit from additional guidance that was more comprehensive in terms of helping them navigate the process to, how do you go about creating policies and procedures and codes that would facilitate the development of abandoned mine lands, brownfields, and coal impacted land for solar. So the Solar Playbook was born as an idea. And through this process, we've dubbed SolSmart 2.0, which was really a collaborative effort that was led by the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia, the Solar Foundation, Appalachian Voices, and then the Virginia SolSmart team. We were able to engage with the localities and the communities in the region and get their input into developing the playbook. And it was through this regional support and coordination that made it possible to obtain the funding and put together the resources that were necessary to bring this playbook to fruition. Next slide, please. So what is SolSmart? Well, SolSmart is a national designation program designed to recognize localities for encouraging solar energy growth. Ultimately, it's designed to reduce the soft costs associated with solar development. It's specifically for individual localities or for regional organizations, but there's a benefit to localities coming together as a region and to forming a cohort, so we encourage that. As Adam mentioned, it's led by the Solar Foundation, the International City County Management Association, and it's funded through the U.S. Department of Energy Solar Technologies Office. Here in Virginia, DMME partnered with UVA in order to offer this no-cost technical assistance program to localities. It's available to localities across the Commonwealth, and we're continually recruiting and enrolling localities. We're working with several right now. And recently, the city of Williamsburg achieved their silver designation, and Pulaski County achieved gold designation. They also got a special recognition in their permitting and inspections category, which Nick will go over. I think on the next slide, he'll get into some more the more detail about how the program works, what the criteria for designation is, and how the program's criteria can really support localities in priorities. So if you are a locality or you're working with a locality that might be interested in working with us to achieve some of these, or to receive some of this technical assistance, we encourage localities to submit a request for consultation from the DMME SolSmart webpage. The address is shown here on the screen, or you can just Google or go to DMME's website and find their page that way. Next screen. Okay, Nick.
All right, thank you very much, Elizabeth. My name is Nick Kasza, Program Manager on the Sustainability team at the National League of Cities. And I've been working on SolSmart for about 5 years. It is a national program, so that means we work across the country in various states, from Anchorage, Alaska to South Miami, Florida. I've worked with communities, including quite a few in the Virginia region as well. As quite a few speakers have alluded to, SolSmart is a national solar energy designation and technical assistance program. And the program itself is based on an objective set of criteria that's based on solar energy best practices. And so these are things that we have learned collectively as a team of about 10 to 12 organizations over the course of years working in both solar energy and with local governments. And so we've created this criteria that has 75 unique credits that really focuses on what levers local governments can do to promote a healthy solar energy market within their communities. Originally, when SolSmart started, it really had a focus on residential and rooftop solar energy. But as we talked with more communities, we kind of recognized what the needs were and expanded the criteria to include large scale ground mounts and the key considerations there, particularly in terms of planning and zoning. So we actually just launched a new criteria at the beginning of this year. We went through a little streamlining exercise, and we now have 75 unique credits for a total of 775 available points in 5 different categories. And again, these are categories that really speak to what local governments can do and work on: permitting and inspection, planning and zoning, government operations, community engagement, and market development. And within those categories, we have a couple of credits that are prerequisites required for any level of designation. As we see here, there's 3 for bronze, 3 for silver, and then 2 for gold. And we have a technical assistance team that can work with communities basically through the entire process. We'll be there during the initial conversation, introducing SolSmart to your community, and then we can walk you through what needs to be completed in order to achieve designation. Some communities have specific initiatives. Maybe it's a feasibility analysis for solar on some rooftops, or launching a Solarize campaign where we can provide additional targeted assistance to ensure that not only can they achieve designation, but they can also work on some of the solar energy initiatives that are very much of interest to that community as well. Once a community is ready to submit for designation, we have a review team that sits independent of the technical assistance team, and they verify that the credits have been achieved by a community, and then they are awarded designation once that verification is complete. Go ahead, Adam. We can move to the next slide. SolSmart right now is actually in the middle of one of our own initiatives. We're doing a level up initiative. So working with localities across the country that have already achieved designation, and we want to work with them to achieve a higher level, whether that's bronze to silver or gold, or maybe silver to gold. We'd like to work with them and help them on their SolSmart journey. If anybody's listening from the Southwest Virginia cohort, or some of the folks in Northern Virginia I worked with, happy to work with you, see if we can get you leveled up to that next designation level. And then we're also looking to really work with regions, planning district commissions, regional organizations, because we realize that there are synergies when you have neighboring localities working together. They may not adopt the exact same policies and processes, but if you can have some level of consistency, transparency and clarity, you can really improve not only the local markets, but then a regional solar market as well. I think we can go to the next slide, but I just want to make one pitch that these slides really don't do justice to what the playbook looks like. It is just a wealth of information. Really recommend folks check it out on the website. And then also SolSmart has updated a program guide as well. And there's a lot of fantastic community examples from across the country, templates and resources as well to help communities on their solar journey. So 2 great resources to check out.
Thanks, Nick. In the last few minutes here, I thought I'd highlight some of the resources that we've developed over the past year and that we've delivered to localities, either through the SolSmart program or through UVA's partnership with DMME. And together, this really creates a suite of resources and assistance to the localities that we can leverage with SolSmart to meet their needs. So first, as Nick mentioned, one of the great things about the SolSmart program is that it is a nationwide program. So it allows us to draw on best practices and experience that other states and localities in other states have gone through already. And one of those is understanding best practices in permitting and inspections. There's a national expert who we brought to Virginia to offer this statewide training to any locality in Virginia, whether they were committed to the SolSmart designation process or not. It was a 3-part webinar series, and through that process, localities that participated already achieved a single prerequisite for their silver designation. So for any of the localities that went through that process, if they choose to come back and go through SolSmart with us, they've got a leg up. Another technical resource we're really proud of is the Sol Tax Analysis Tool. Carey mentioned it earlier, and I'll touch on it here. Basically, it's a tool to help localities evaluate or inform their decision-making regarding whether the M&T or the revenue share tax model is more advantageous to them in their particular circumstances. There's a link to that tool here. You can also access it through the Weldon Cooper Center's Energy Transition Initiative resources page, if you'd like to Google that. Finally, there's an upcoming Virginia Solar Survey that we're sponsoring. It will be administered to all the counties and independent cities in Virginia, and it's intended to give us insight into what resources and technical assistance is needed across the state. SolSmart is a fantastic resource, and if we can augment that and supplement that with additional resources that we either develop internally or that we partner with others to develop and deliver to localities, we'd like to do that. So we're looking forward to continuing to develop and offer resources and support, whether that be to individual localities or to a cohort or a regional organization. Please stay engaged with us. You can go to the next slide. Let us know, what your questions are or what kinds of assistance you're really looking for. As Ed said, the Solar Playbook really is a great tool to help localities and communities across the state benefit from the energy transition, particularly with regard to brownfields, redevelopment for solar. And so we're committed to listening to your need and responding with resources and developing assistance as needed. So please reach out, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was just blown away. I couldn't think of a better way to kind of wrap the program today with more resources, with the playbook, literally putting it all on a silver platter for folks. I mean, I just can't thank you enough. The work that you make it's also easy. We could have given you so much more time too. Of course, it's not so easy, but in the limited time that you guys had and the way that you just toggled through that, it's tremendous. And I really encourage everybody to follow those breadcrumbs and dig into that in the knowledge binder. Adam, did you have any follow-up questions for this incredible group?
No, there was a question in the Q&A about localities that I think got answered. Like Carey was typing something.
Could you go ahead and re-ask it for everybody and for the YouTubers? Yeah.
Yeah, it was what localities were served. And for the Southwest region, it was the counties of Lee, Wise, Dickinson, Scott, Russell, and Tazewell, plus the city of Norton and the town of St. Paul. Why did the town of St. Paul do something that's for counties? Because they're overachievers. That's why, in the best way possible. And I'll let somebody else from the state team tag any other localities that y'all want to. I think there's a lot though at this point.
There are quite a few. I know in Northern Virginia, City of Fairfax, County of Fairfax, Loudoun County, Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, Charlottesville and Albemarle County, James City County, quite a few. There's probably a few I'm forgetting. There's 2 regional commissions in Virginia, Northern Virginia Regional Commission and New River Valley Regional Commission have also been designated as well. So definitely still time to get on board though.
It sounds like the Grammys. I mean so much great work, such as a renaissance, my friends. So we've got a few. Ed, what about you? Any final thoughts? I thought I really enjoyed your presentation and your remarks as well.
Sure. So I think one of the things that comes out here is going back to Adam's cake or burgers, whichever one you prefer. I'm going to opt for I'm going to take the cake and let somebody else have the burger stack. But it really is a layered effort. We've got Soul Smart, we've got DMME, we've got the Appalachian Voices, working on the ground in the Southwest region. We have, and I believe there are a number of other nonprofit organizations that have been involved that Adam flashed up there in the beginning, and all of these groups have contributed and helped to maintain the momentum to move forward in Southwest Virginia. And I think that that team approach is really the way to go, and it's been is yielding results.
How about you, Elizabeth? Any follow-up thoughts?
I echo what Ed said. I think that there's benefit to, localities and organizations coming together with a focused and a singular goal. It really allows us to leverage the resources that we have at our disposal. And so we encourage that, but that's not to say that, great work can't come out of a single locality with a defined focus and a defined priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I think empowering localities is part of the secret sauce here to actually seizing this moment, this opportunity that we've been talking about all day. But Nick, you've been in now 5 years, and that's been a critical time in the Renaissance here. What can you add?
I mean, I just once again plug that Soul Smart is really here to help communities and meet them on where they're at. So we're meant to be that additional helping hand. We're not recreating the wheel here at all. There's a lot that have already been on this journey. We've learned from their trials and tribulations. And so that's why we have best practices now to really leverage. And one of the nice things about Soul Smart is because it's tiered, there's really an opportunity for the largest county or the smallest town or city as well. And for our kind of lower bronze designation, we're really just trying to get an understanding of what a community currently does. So what is their current policies? What is their current permitting and inspection processes? And we're going to get an understanding of that. And then if they want to kind of improve or challenge themselves and aim for quicker turnaround time, or really try and streamline their zoning for solar, we can help them there as well. And so it's a really great opportunity, and it's kind of a win-win. You can educate your staff internally. We have a lot of resources to educate your community members and residents. And then hopefully you see more local solar energy installed, which is just a great benefit all around.
Absolutely. It's a perfect way to put a big exclamation point on this super important and super practical session. Being an attorney, real estate attorney, first and foremost in my career, being at the closing table, working with localities, this is how we make it real. It's the key nexus. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway from this session goes to Ed, really talking about reactive versus proactive diligence, especially for municipalities and the localities. If you can get your stuff together in advance, it's much better than trying to react. And it's even if you have these big beautiful ideas, you want a half acre for bees and butterflies with a nice little walkway alongside. If you put that out there in front, the private sector, the developers know, and they can work around that. They can put it right in front of their proposals themselves. I mean, Ed mentioned putting it right in your comp plan, right in your zoning codes, and I think that those are real actionable takeaways that resonate beyond Virginia. And I see a great comment from Carey Hearn in the chat about the utility of the playbook really everywhere. So I encourage, everywhere, wherever you're watching this now or down the road. It might be a little dated if you're watching, in 2030, but there's some really great stuff, some really great schemes to follow. Okay, so thank you guys, in particular thanks to Mr. Wells and Appalachian Voices, and you guys are just such a catalytic force. But big bravo and virtual claps for everyone. Keep doing this important work and go forward and find these people. They know what's going on. So with that, I want to get into what is our last segment today, and we're going to do this every day. It's the Experts Exchange, the National Solar Experts Exchange, and we're bringing back some of our presenters from earlier in the day, from both the federal and state level. And I want to apologize right at the top to Ms. Katie Cyrus, who should be on the schedule. She was always planned to come back from our first session, but for some reason, she is not on the online schedule, which we will correct. So there she is, if you have some pollinator carryover. But the segue has already been made. We just had the playbook in our hands. We're talking about empowering municipalities and localities. And today's Q&A session will start with some very powerful infomercials from two more incredibly important organizations who are in the front lines. They have the expertise, and they actually are providing free resources and expertise. They will take your calls for free. And we mentioned Mr. Gary White from the New Jersey Institute of Technology's Technical Assistant to Brownfield program, which is part of US EPA's Brownfield program. And we've also, I don't see Gary, but I do see Mr. Christopher Brazell. He is from the Appalachian Regional Commission, who a lot of folks in the region know, but they're doing tremendous work in this space as well. And we're going to start the session giving them the opportunity to kind of tee up these just incredible resources that everyone should know about. Before we open it up, introduce the rest of our experts and try to take your questions in the chat, both on Zoom and on YouTube. We have our moderators standing by. We're going to go back to some of the questions that we missed if we have to, but this is the big rep. But first, with very, very important information, difference making, critical path type stuff. Who is going first? Christopher, is it you?
I think Gary's going to go first.
Gary.
Yeah, in the house.
Oh, okay. I can't see Gary for some. Oh, that's my fault though. There's Gary. Hi, Mr. White. Hey, how are you, sir?
How are you, Dan? Thank you so much for emceeing and getting everything ready. And thank Kelsey and Carey and everybody behind the scenes doing the Wizard of Oz thing while we get everything settled for this conference. I know the future is bright. It's a gloomy day here in New Jersey, but the future still is bright. And I'm really just excited to be here to talk to you guys about my organization. As Dan mentioned, my name is Gary White. I'm a project manager with the New Jersey Institute of Technology's Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities program. Never can be said in one breath, but our friends like to call us TAB if you just want to keep it short. Today, I want to talk about what our team does and really harp on our motto motto of making your team work smarter, not harder when it comes to brownfield redevelopment. So
Carey,
what do,
I'm
yes,
sorry, your thing was showing up really beautiful, but now it's just black.
it's, okay, hold on.
There we go.
Okay, how about this? Yeah, we'll just do it like this. So TAB, what do we do? So we provide technical assistance to any community that's looking to redevelop or reclaim brownfield properties. And we have a three-pronged approach to doing that. Our mission is to empower these communities to obviously work harder and not smarter, and also be in the know when it comes to brownfield redevelopment. Our three-pronged approach includes our workshops, websites, and one-on-one technical assistance. Our workshops really allow us to bring experts to the table so in order for you to get the information that you need when it comes to brownfield redevelopment. So these include niche topics such as liability seminars, workshops on topics such as solar field, brownfields to bright fields, speaking at conferences, and also doing community outreach with communities. Next, on our website, we house a ton of information specific to brownfield redevelopment that really can take you from what is a brownfield to actual cleanup. And in that, we also host EPA, links to EPA documents that can also help demystify some of the brownfield topics that often mystify localities. So you also get information straight from the source. And last but not least, which I think is our bread and butter, is our one-to-one technical assistance. We really are poised to kind of sit down with, we really pride ourselves on sitting down with communities to address their specific brownfield related issues. It's a completely informal process. You can reach out to us, and I have our contact information at the end of this presentation. But it's a really informal process where we'll sit down and tailor our assistance to what you need. So who can receive TAB assistance? So we get this often. The eligible entities, in short, would be any government, nonprofit, tribal organization, community organization. Think of the public sector and nonprofits. Ineligible entities for TAB assistance would be for-profit entities, so consultants and any other sort of for-profit organization. But the interesting thing about it is if you are able to work together, if a consultant is working with a nonprofit or a government entity, we can all work together on these brownfield projects, and we can provide you with this technical assistance. I like to say, especially in Region 3, brownfields is a team sport, and in that redeveloping them requires many hands and many minds to be brought to the table. And so we really like to employ the breaking down the silos approach in doing that, and including as many relevant players as possible to help you redevelop these projects. Some eligible work, so things that we will do or things that we have done: preliminary brownfield inventories, EPA grant critiques, and I'll go into the funding very briefly. Community outreach, stakeholder education is really, really important. And then also funding and redevelopment strategy. Those are the typical things that we will work on. It's not a laundry list of what we do, but they are the most popular things that localities ask for when it comes to brownfield redevelopment. Ineligible work. So we are not consultants, and I like to make that distinction. We are empowering communities to make the best decision so that they can select a consultant to do this work. So sampling, construction work, any sort of legal representation. You will still need to get your environmental attorneys, your environmental consultants, your LSRPs, your engineers and things of that nature when it comes to redeveloping this, when it comes to reclaiming these projects. But it's nice to be empowered with the information to make the best decision to choose those people. So funding, right? And this is the age-old question: where's the money at, right? EPA provides 3 pockets of funding that I thought were probably very, very relevant to the audience today. 1 being assessment, 2 being cleanup, and 3 being the multi-purpose grant. And I believe it was gone over earlier today. However, what we really pride ourselves on doing is poising communities to go after these assessment, cleanup, and multi-purpose grants, and making sure that they are in the best position possible to get awarded. Now, with that said, it's a very, very competitive competition that the EPA runs on a yearly basis, and not all projects can be funded. However, engaging us early on, utilizing our assistance early on really puts you in a good position to not only get funded, but also continue along the process and create a good bedrock for getting future funding. EPA views their funding not just as the funding to do this work, but as seed funding, so that you can leverage and get these projects done expeditiously. So some examples of assistance. I already talked about one of these already, but reviewing and critiquing grant applications is really, really advantageous for people who are interested in brownfield funding from the EPA. We provide that assistance. You send us your grant applications, and we'll go over it and review it. I think at this point we are pretty on par with EPA in terms of perspective. But we like to go through the application, the grant application, and make sure that you've really, really understood the spirit of the guidelines and what EPA is asking for, so that you can get the most amount of points possible. The other thing is bringing environmental attorneys, to kind of talk about due diligence. It's important for communities to understand, what is and what isn't. There's a lot of hearsay that comes with brownfield redevelopment. So it's demystifying that as well is something that we also do. And then, provide guidance on future funding opportunities as well. In addition, there are some other things such as consultant procurement. A lot of communities struggle with coming up with RFPs and things of that nature. We have information on our website with draft RFPs that you can utilize to kind of set as the template for looking for consultants. In addition, interpreting technical and scientific reports and data. Not everybody is an environmental scientist. Sometimes you need someone with that expertise to kind of break it down in layman's terms. We're here for you. All in all, I like to say, again, our assistance is free, but it's also invaluable, in terms of what it can provide for you in using it early on in the brownfield redevelopment process. A lot of communities have, avoided some liability issues just by having a simple conversation. And Vince and me and everybody can attest to it. It's sometimes just letting somebody know, but you need to do your due diligence before you purchase that property, right? And it really, really helps frame the mindset of the community that, hey, not only is there, things that I need to be thinking about, but there is help along the way. So when in doubt, again, contact NGIT tab. We're only a phone call, tweet, LinkedIn message, email, carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do. We're only one call away, and we can really help orient you in this confusing world of brownfield redevelopment, especially when it comes to solar redevelopment. And as data centers are expanding, as our tech, as Northern Virginia becomes the next budding tech center for the U.S., the energy demands are going to increase. And with that, as we've seen, solar is becoming extremely, extremely attractive. And again, the future is bright. But I want to leave you guys with this last thing. The only communities that do not receive TAB assistance are those who do not ask. And that's a quote from our executive director. We try to give everybody, if we don't know who, if we don't know what, we may know who, and we always try to, make sure that we leave communities in a better shape than when we met them. So in that, I would like to say, if you guys need to reach out to us, there's our email, phone, and contact information on this last slide. And I believe everything will be shared with you at the end of this conference. But thank you, Dan. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, everybody, for putting this together, because we really like to see this, coming together of not only technical assistance providers, but minds who are interested in the redevelopment of, within Virginia.
Thanks, Gary. Great job. And thanks for all the work that you do too. It's really, difference making, critical path type stuff. And really encourage everybody to track down Tab. We will be sharing Gary's presentation along with every other presentation today. And yeah, Colette Santasieri, she's great. She's even got a TED about brownfields, so you can go find that. That's really great homework for everybody. And now I'd like to introduce again Mr. Christopher Brazell from the Appalachian Regional Commission, who they have their own vector on the Renaissance and doing a lot of important work.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen, unless you have my presentation up, Lucey.
Yep, got your whole PowerPoint.
Does everyone see the screen?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay.
Looks good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Brazell. I'm Infrastructure Program Manager with the Appalachian Regional Commission. And for those of you who are not familiar with ARC, we are a fairly unique federal-state partnership. It's a commission formed by the federal government in partnership with the 13 member states of Appalachia, of which Virginia is one of them. And our service territory in Virginia is pretty much all of Southwest Virginia, Lee, Tazewell, Wise, Dickinson counties, and so forth. ARC, on the infrastructure side, we fund primarily water and sewer projects over our 50+ year history. But we've also been doing a lot of funding broadband infrastructure projects in recent years. We've done some brownfield remediation and general site development projects. We haven't done much in the space of energy infrastructure projects. Well, we've been doing some smart grid projects in conjunction with broadband, but not much in the way of energy generation and storage. So we saw this as an opportunity to talk to an audience and maybe looking to get those kind of projects in front of us for review. We are a grant funding agency, so our funding is free. At Gary's organization, we have eligible and ineligible recipients. The eligible recipients are the same units of local government, the nonprofits, including electric cooperatives and other community organizations, and the ineligible organizations are for-profit entities of any kind. So again, we haven't funded much in the energy generation space or solar space, but one project that does stand in mind is one we funded a few years ago, actually in Virginia, the Bark Community Solar Project. And that was a $500,000 grant we provided to Bark Electric Cooperative to construct a community solar facility at Highland Bell Elementary in Rockbridge County. And this was a shared solar project like others you've heard mentioned today. It was a 250 kilowatt facility that was actually kind of a unique project because it's a hybrid. It was energy infrastructure in terms of the community solar array that was going to be built, but it was also a STEM learning project as well. And often we don't really mix education projects with infrastructure, but this is kind of an interesting hybrid. The elementary school was providing STEM education about solar energy to K through 12 students, and the target for the project was to serve 60 residential and 16 commercial customers who would subscribe to the community solar and see some significant cost savings. And this project was actually funded from Virginia's allocation of ARC funds that they get every year called area development funding. And Virginia, as a state, generally supports projects that promote energy conservation and eco-friendly resources. And the project here, the purpose for the community was to stabilize and reduce energy costs for commercial and residential customers. The local partners who participated in this project supported because it helped with business recruitment. It spurred direct and indirect economic impact by hiring locally for the installation of the solar facility. And it sort of pointed the community in a new direction, showing strategic opportunities for new industries. And again, the cost savings for commercial and residential customers were several $1,000s each per year. So against these projections, the project finished a few years ago and it's actually even audited and had a really good clean bill of health from the audit, and it showed that they vastly overperformed their objectives of households and businesses served. The education component wasn't as successful as they envisioned, but the core part of this project was always about energy infrastructure and the community solar, and that part was quite successful. So it gave us some lessons learned for other projects that we might see going forward. So we do see that this type of project can be popular, can show local demand. We'd encourage other communities that are looking to install solar, again, through eligible entities like local governments, county governments, and nonprofits and co-ops to come to us if you see projects like this that you might want to fund it yourself. The things we look for as an organization in terms of our return on investment are sort of key performance measures that are really centered around who are the beneficiaries and what's the economic impact of those beneficiaries and the job impact of those beneficiaries. So a project that's probably going to do well in front of us is one that's really going to impact a significant number of customers. It's going to generate enough energy that's going to show cost savings to those beneficiaries. And of course, we always like to see local job creation. I think someone mentioned earlier today about a lot of the labor is outside the community. So we definitely like to see projects that involve a lot of local job creation. And so I'll leave it here and we can cover more in the Q&A. But this is really kind of an opportunity to put ARC in front of an audience like this, so that if you're in eligible communities and projects like this you want to see get funded, go ahead and send them our way. We also, by the way, do planning grants. We actually have a grant right now with Appalachian Voices where they're looking at innovative ways of financing solar throughout the ARC region. So even if you're not ready to do construction, you want to sort of plan what your next step is on solar, ARC is a good resource for planning grants as well. So I'll leave it with that and turn it back over to Dan. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that's a perfect place to leave it because we've talked, I think one of my key takeaways today is definitely being proactive, getting ready, getting ahead, planning for so many reasons. All the layers of the cake, as Mr. Adam Wells was describing to us beautifully earlier. You really have to have your ducks in a row on this. You got to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and all the other metaphors and things I could use. But it really is so important. But the other good news, though, is that it's there. These programs are there. Christopher's ready to take your calls. Gary's ready via email or carrier pigeon, as he said, even. They're very serious about this. This is either quasi-governmental or, Gary's, kind of on a government grant work at an institution. So, these guys and their organizations that they represent, they're always on and they're ready to go. And all these other related programs, I'm already starting to think about the capital stack and how can we actually assemble these things from conception to construction. And there's so many resources there. We're building these uniquely combined projects. We're merging worlds and acronyms. So if you're taking notes on acronyms today, you're probably on page 3 or 4. But that's okay. We're all in this together, and we have the professionals to get this work done. So I just want to thank everybody who's gone today. I want to particularly thank Christopher and Gary kind of for bringing us home presentation-wise. I want to thank all the audience who's hung in And if you're still here, we've really got you sold on solar redevelopment, and you probably have some really great questions too. But I know a lot of our folks are going to be streaming live later. Like everybody knows that they're going to be able to come back to the stream. So the eyes of history are watching, and you never know who we'll be able to catch later with some of these great questions. So with that, let me just do just a little bit of housekeeping, because if you have a great question tonight, you can drop it in the question queue overnight. So that's going to stay on. Make sure everybody, if you want to share your contact information with the wider world, you can get into the Knowledge Binder using the free and official profiler, which is in a lot of the links going around. That's another little form you just fill out, and we'll expand on your contact and your company's contact. You can fill it out once for yourself, once for your company, and we'll share that because we want everybody to connect out of this event. But make sure that you jump out and complete those forms. Get us your questions. Keep firing the questions now. The chat can come alive. And I actually want to bring Mr. Vince Maiden into the conversation because he's been hawking the conversation all day. One of the Wizards of Oz, as Gary said. And I kind of just wanted to get your thoughts first, Vince. You know, you were early on this idea, kind of driving Virginia towards this moment. And what are your thoughts on day one so far?
I thought it was a great day of content. There was great interaction, questions out there. I think we got a lot more to cover over the next 2 days. I'm really just happy to have more stakeholders involved, engaged, and really helping design what we've seen today. There's going to be an explosion of solar across the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is our chance to help design what that looks like, to influence policymakers who have been here listening in, to help design our government agencies to enable this type of development on reused lands instead of being a deterrent or causing problems, you know, for people that want to do this. I think we are on the forefront of that, and it's good. I think some states got behind the 8 ball on that, and it's harder to catch up. So I'm thankful that we're here in this space, and I hope people keep asking tough questions this next couple of days and to this group now. Because it's good to get these issues out on the table, like stormwater we've been hearing about. It's going to be a big one for tomorrow, so I look forward to it.
Yep, and my last tease before we start taking questions is after you rest up, you survived the solar gauntlet today. Tomorrow morning, we're starting a little early, 8:15 a.m., making room for Ms. Kelly Speaks Bachman from the new Biden administration with a view inside DOE. And she's going to be joined by Virginia Natural Resources Secretary Matthew Strickler. And they're going to actually have a very interesting state federal conversation and question and answer between each other, because everyone is trying to figure out how we can best collaborate right now at every level of our civilization. And that's why I'm so hopeful for this moment. And look at all the great stars that we have on the bank of experts here. A diverse group, public-private sector. We've got multiple agencies down there in Virginia building the Renaissance. So Vince, you got some questions queued up for us. Where should we go first?
I was looking through the chat to see if we have any new ones here. There's one question regarding the solar install that resulted in the 430 kilowatt hour from a 250 install. How was that determined, and is the information available? I forgot who the speaker was on that discussion, or if they're available. That's one of the questions.
I think general details are available. We'll probably have to check with the co-op for more specific information, but just email me as detailed a list of questions you like about the project, and I'll answer what I can and refer you to Bark if I need to for anything I don't know firsthand.
So, I actually have one. Nick on here, Nick Collier is on, and I guess I've been working with the Department of Mine, Mineral and Energy out of Big Stone Gap. I'm a little bit of a homer from Southwest Virginia, so, I like to work in that area. And they, over the last few years, have been really looking at innovative land use and on mine lands. And I guess like to hear a little bit about what Nick, what you think we should try to get out of this conference over the next 2 days. You're going to be speaking, and what are the things that people should look for over the next couple of days?
Hey, thanks, Vince. Well, I think probably the one thing that, that I took away from today is that you've got a ton of resources here from a ton of different agencies, public, private, more so than when we did this last time. And almost every one of these folks is willing to help in any way they can. So you're going to hear about these resources. You're going to get a knowledge binder. And just like with the TAB Center, reach out. If you have questions of DMME, there's several DMME folks you're going to see through the next couple of days. You're going to have our contact info. Reach out to us. I think everyone here on this panel, and the common theme throughout the 3 days is we're all working to kind of develop these opportunities and find a way where we can help folks realize some of these goals, because we all realize with Vcea that there's a target and some goals that are out there for the state, and that we need to uncover every possible stone. So use us as, as assets that are available. And you're going to hear in some presentations that me and some of the DMME folks do about some of these programs, and some of them are newer. We've got some new branches in DMME that you're just going to start learning about. So continue to reach out, ask questions. If you don't know, that's what we're here for. We can help walk you through some of this stuff. And if we're not the best person, I work with DEQ pretty frequently. I'm going to say, hey, go talk to Vince or me. That's the folks you need to talk to.
Yeah.
Just want to kind of tag in here for just a second.
I was going to throw it to you, Carey, so go ahead.
Oh, great. Well, I wanted to say that there's also a new emerging space in the solar development landscape in Virginia around community solar, or what we call in Virginia shared solar. And those projects are going to cap off at 5 megawatts per project. And we're currently working with stakeholders to identify, how that's going to work in terms of the low income subscriber portion of the program and other components. And licensing is going to open up for developers and solar subscriber organizations later this year. And I think the size of these projects, there can really be some great innovation. At first, this shared solar program is only going to be available in Dominion power territory. So that's kind of one consideration. But there's another multifamily program that will apply in Old Dominion Power as well as Dominion Power. But I think that size range could be a really interesting fit on brownfields or on these types of sites that we're talking about throughout the conference. And so thinking about that intersectionality of, serving a community that hasn't necessarily been able to, access financing for solar in the past. Maybe they have a roof structure that is shaded by a tree, and so they can't do it on their own property, or, other scenarios. And so this is where we can kind of get that multi-layered cake going on in serving multiple, goals, helping people reduce their electric bills, all the things. So.
Yeah, and I think Lora had mentioned a lot of the brownfield projects are under 5 megawatts, the ones that have been completed in a lot of the mapping data. So I think, is that a fair statement, Lora? Yeah, shaking her head, yeah. So I do agree that there's an opportunity in that space. And I keep saying, don't neglect the small to mid-scale solar that's going to have to be part of the suite to do it in a fair and equitable fashion. Let me see if I got any new ones from the chat box here.
While you queue that up, I'll just jump in on that point. And
yep.
Laura, feel free to jump in on top of me. But yeah, I think first, there's a lot of both urban and rural communities with these odd parcels, or some adjoined odd lots and parcels where it might make sense. There's really maybe nothing else they can do but some kind of small tactical solar development, shared solar system. And we'll see, there's obviously, especially in urban areas, shading issues and other things, but we're going to, nip and tuck these things kind of around. But Laura, you understand this universe. You still see a lot of potential for kind of smaller kind of municipal sites, both in urban and rural areas?
Hi, Dan. Absolutely. There's a trend in 1 to 5 megawatt projects, but there are smaller, and there are also, there's also a trend to larger projects. So we do have a lot of information on projects between 1 and 5 megawatts. A lot of that, of course, is driven by the third of the country, the sites that are in Massachusetts, but I think it would hold true even if you took the Massachusetts landfills out of the equation. But we are seeing a trend, just like the rest of the market, to larger projects. But of course, all sizes are possible, and depending on the off-taker, depending on the generation needs, depending on what the community wants, all different sizes of projects are in the mix.
You're on mute, pal. Start. Vince, yeah, can you start over?
I'll jump in. There was a question about, are there currently any requirements for ag fields to be remediated from pesticides and herbicides? And the short answer to that is no. Typically, pesticides and herbicides were applied as prescribed for the use of those crops on that field. So there's not even if you have some low-level hits, there's not usually a requirement out there. With that said, we do see some orchards out there that are generally going to a higher and more intensive use, going from an orchard to residential property. And we have seen those type of sites go through our VRP in order to deal with the residential reuse. But when you put solar on there, there's actually going to be less exposure. There's going to be no crops being grown on that property. And once the development of that project is finished, there's going to be little exposure to people using the property. So that's why solar is such an ideal reuse of brownfields property out there. And there's a lot of brownfields properties I can think of that one of the best reuses is as a solar project, because once you finish the installation, there'll be few people going onto that property. So
yeah, long-term interim use, it's worth underscoring. This is not permanent. It's not putting up a 40-story building. These things are relatively easy to take down when we're talking about the world of real estate. So especially if we can sneak a little soil regeneration on alongside, it's a great punt, even if we're punting. So, but people don't think about it like that. I think especially sometimes in the community, there's a lot of resistance. It's like, oh, we're losing that field forever. I don't know. I grew up on a farm, and putting some of that land to fallow might not be a bad idea. Maybe if we're thinking about it in like a 1,000-year scale. But I digress. I'm sure I know we've got more.
Another question questions about now that I'm finally got this thing off mute. There was another question regarding, are there any incentives from DOD or DOE regarding solar projects as part of redevelopment of former DOD sites or bases, brownfields or otherwise? One, I would argue that most of those sites are one big brownfield, but does anybody know of any federal incentives from that direction to do this sort of work? Anything you heard of, Laura, on your side?
Hey, Vince. So the Department of Defense, of course, has their renewable energy goals, and that could be, there are regional project leads within each one of the different parts of DOD, as well as a headquarters lead for renewable energy. So there could very well be, I don't know any off the top of my head, and I don't know of any for brownfields specifically, but they do put out requests for proposal pretty frequently, and they have newsletters that they put out pretty regularly, as well as lists of projects that they're either recently completed or, so DOD is definitely on the renewable energy train, and Department of Energy, of course, I believe will have, programs going forward, and do have programs. It would be really helpful if the person who's asking the question, if they could tell us, are they working in a certain community? do they have a certain site in mind? That would be really helpful. And that's the kind of thing also they could reach out to me later and we could discuss.
Laura, we are doing a project on a Navy base, and I believe each one of the project, the branches of service have a resilient energy or renewable energy office of procurement. By now, we work with the Navy quite a bit, and they have set up a dedicated office for renewables and procurement of more resilient energy. I think it's separate from them. They're able to coordinate with frac bases that are in their purview as well.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. Is it public? Where is the Navy installation?
We're working on a project in Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, great.
That's perfect. Thanks, Paul. Keep up the good work. I love it all. Vince, what else we got?
Well, we've let Caitlin off the hook up there, but I know that session always generates some questions.
I've got some from
one comment, maybe one comment to address there is that somebody said they worry about the time to implement the grower programs in Virginia and increases to Virginia ecotypes. By the end, the solar bloom will be over and the solar sites will already be vegetated. So, you know, I guess they're worried about the time it takes to get this program up and running versus what's going to happen on the ground. Do you have any words of wisdom or guidance there for those folks?
Yeah, so that was, I think, specifically in reference to the business plan, not to the majority, I guess, of the program. And so the business plan, as a reminder, is just related to growing the native seed industry in Virginia. And he is right that it takes years and years and years to bring ecotypes or really any kind of new seed product to market. So it's not something that happens instantaneously, which is why we need to get going on growing it now. The good news is that there's still plenty of seed mix that can be used to participate in the program until then. There's no issue with that. And retrofits are always an option. So even if all the solar is built, there's still the possibility that in the future people will want to participate in the program at a later date. And I anticipate that the demand for native seed supply is only going to increase over time. So even if it's not for solar, you know, Renee had addressed that there were so many other places that pollinator habitat could be implemented in the state, including right-of-ways or roadsides, parks, private land. So there are a ton of applications to the business plan beyond solar. So I think one of those, it's almost like if we build it, it will come, but I guess it's like if we grow it, it'll be used. So.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yeah, shout out to all of our great pollinator sessions. It's the theme of this year's event, and we've got Ernst Seeds, Roundstone Native Seeds, Monarch Vegetation Services. I mean, they're really trying to make this happen, and it's funny we have to use Mother Nature. You know, the old can't get away from physics, and the old tricks are the best tricks. And if you want a fun term to Google right now, fuzz and buzz is from Ernst Seeds, and you know they've got it by the bag and it's ready to go. So the tools are out there. What else do we got? Anybody else want to jump in? Before we take any other questions, who's got hot thoughts they've been holding on the tip of their tongue? Anyone? Any one of our experts?
There was a question about vandalism, and I've asked that very question of some of the developers, and they say that they've seen very little vandalism. Generally, a 7-foot fence with barbed wire on top prevents vandalism. People can vandalize anything out there, but surprisingly little, and no bullet damage from hunters that have been reported. With that said, there's a farm near me, and I've gone down there and I've seen evidence that deer have been able to jump that 7-foot fence and go inside and graze and somehow get out.
I will add on another teaser for a session tomorrow where we talk about agriculture and sheep. as as an application for groundskeeping, maintenance, etc. And when you have these types of co-benefits on the site over the course of the operations, you have more eyes and ears on site. You have, less opportunity for things to kind of be flying under the radar. So, I think these are all sorts of things to consider, but, kind of some bonus benefits of thinking about the co-applications during the lifetime of the project after it's developed.
Yeah, the one that I've seen comments and I've had people ask me directly is our solar work group folks are still on here, and Carey's been real involved with that, but it's been talked about. But again, how do you get involved with that group if you want to get involved? I've got a lot of people in Southwest Virginia that keep saying, I want to get involved. This sounds like they're doing some incredible stuff.
Well, the sheep are incredible and more gentle than the deer or goats, which also jump on the panels. So thanks, Carey. I wanted to tease that, but also actually while we've got Paul, I wanted to kind of throw this Meets question to you. Having done so much of this work in so many places, when I go flash back in my mind to some of the community meetings I've been involved in, barbed wire fences might not help get a solar farm approved, especially in some neighborhoods. So how do you balance that? And have you ever had any, in all your experience, almost 2 decades now doing brownfields to brownfields to brownfields, any vandalism?
We have. I'm chuckling only because I think it was yesterday morning somebody came in and asked us to approve solar powered security cameras on a site that we have, and because we do build projects near where there are people. These are not out in West Texas in the middle of nowhere. These are on sites. The Newport Navy base has neighbors. The Steel Winds project, wind farm up in Buffalo has neighbors. And so it's not unusual that, kids will hang out and, throw things at the panels just for the fun of it. And it will happen. It's not a huge issue, to be honest. Once a year, we might have a vandalism event and it's fine. As far as community questions, we run the gamut of all sorts of things that have been asked over time. A really important thing, though, in talking to, I think Rick Buffalini might still be on, but if you look at projects after they've been built, and then go back to them and say, okay, were there things that were not brought up in permitting that you really wish you had? There's a problem now that nobody knew about when we were permitting this. We've never had that sort of thing. And honestly, we don't get phone calls from places where we've built projects where people are now unhappy with it. There's always people are resistant to change. It's a very normal human type of thing when you're presenting to a community anywhere that we're going to build something different, that they're worried about it. But after it's built, solar is a very low impact in terms of environmental impacts that people find out later there was something we didn't know. We've never had that type of an issue on a solar project where people have come back and said, I'm really unhappy with this after we go. Wrapping up, though, by the way, we have had a lot of proposals about goats and deers and all sorts of things. We do build fences that allow dogs and bunnies to get into the field. Goats, I've never built a project that allowed goats to mow the lawn or to take care of it. My understanding is that they will chew the wires, and that's a big problem over time. So we're not planning to do a goat project, but my understanding it's a big problem.
Thanks, Paul. That's awesome.
Regarding the Southwest Solar Work Group comment, I think Vince asked about that, and Nick Polier is on the advisory group, so Nick could probably speak a little bit more to the planning and the strategy, but I put a link in the chat around where you can sign up for emails and events, and definitely recommend that everyone do that and check out their website. They've got a lot of great information, including the playbook. And I really think it's a great resource for anyone working on solar in Virginia beyond Southwest. I mean, it definitely has a Southwest focus, but even the playbook, I send it to other people who are in, the Middle Peninsula or South Side or other locations, just because it is such a great high-level overview of the policy landscape and other considerations for solar in general. So just because it's, focused on Southwest, don't be afraid to open it up and look into it, because I think you'll really discover a lot of great resources.
And I'll piggyback on what Carey was talking about. So the solar work group, the planning team meets on a weekly basis, but the solar work group itself is open to anyone in Virginia who wants to join. And we have folks throughout the state, from Southwest all the way up to Northeast, that are members of the solar work group. You can go to swvasolar.org and sign up there. You'll get your email will be put on the list, and you'll start getting emails about functions. As we're starting to get into spring and summer, we start to do more for the public. In the winter, we have less meetings, but we'll start having more meetings here now. We do a lot of work on trying to get folks involved in terms of policy updates and folks who are working on policy initiatives. If that's something you're interested in, that's something you can let the folks know on that website that, hey, I want to be involved in this. And I won't talk about it too much because I think it's going to be talked about tomorrow or the next day, but there's 4 primary goals, and anyone that has a affinity for any one of those goals in particular can say, I would like to be involved in this. And we'll put you in that group, and we meet regularly. The planning team kind of decides, meets, as I said, on a weekly basis, and kind of decides and has voting on, projects and some of the initiatives that are going on in Southwest Virginia. But like Carey mentioned, it's a resource for everyone, and we reach out. The work group reaches out to other organizations across the state to kind of collaborate with them in terms of when it comes time for policy work and lobbying for certain initiatives. It becomes more of a statewide effort there. And then if I could say one more thing, Dan and Vince, we were talking earlier about small to mid-sized deployments. And I just wanted to mention that even when we're talking utility scale deployment on brownfields or previously mine sites, we get requests from anywhere from 2 megawatts. We've got them up to as much as 300 or 400 megawatts for us to look at sites in Virginia that might fit those. So typically we stay in maybe the 5 to 20 megawatt range is where we get most of our requests. Obviously, terrain is a limiting factor in Virginia, so you're not going to find too many 500 megawatt sites. They are out there. And if you like Buchanan County, Virginia, then that's the place for you. But there are some sites out there. So we see a wide variety all the way from small up to real large. And I just wanted to make sure I touched on that.
Thanks, Nick. That's kind of right where I wanted to go. I wanted to bring in Gary and actually Christopher, both of you guys, a question kind of for both. Gary, with your experience in like the EPA Brownfield grant cycle and people thinking now about how am I going to get started with this, can you touch just briefly on like what is your recommended timeline? Like how long in advance should someone start, learning about the EPA Brownfield grant, everything that goes into it? Because that's one of the first things, ideally in a perfect world, they'll be front loading that, right at the beginning of their project timeline. Can you help make it real for folks? And then I'm going to ask the same question to Christopher. If somebody's going to work with ARC, how do they get started? But Gary, please.
So the answer to your question, the limit does not exist. It is never too early to learn about the EPA grants program, just because I know that there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of information and data gathering that you need to do on the front end. And so making sure that you're in the know, getting to know the right players involved, your state VCP program, your EPA regional contacts and all your technical assistance providers. It's really, really advantageous for communities to get in early. We can help, kind of draft, draft a draft proposal with you to make sure that, okay, this is, you understand what the EPA is looking for in their brownfield, in their brownfield proposal and what they're looking to award. I also like to say it's good to get it started early because a lot of times EPA requires you to do community engagement on the front end. So if you haven't done any community engagement, it's not wise to think that you can do a one-off engagement event and think that that's going to suffice. It doesn't read well in a proposal, and it doesn't work well for redevelopment.
Yeah, we in Virginia, we always partner with NJIT to do a grant writing workshop at least once a year for folks that are really interested in going for it. And EPA grants are really good, but they're very competitive. So I'll drop in the chat box a sign up to our mailing list where I promise not to spam you that often unless there's some really good information you need to know about grants and cool things happening in Virginia brownfields. But that's a great way to, figure out exactly how to write these and how to be successful too.
Thanks, Vince. And Christopher, what about ARC? I mean, you kind of mentioned it in your remarks, but how can people get started, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think a good place to start are the local development districts, which I guess in Virginia, they're maybe they call planning and development districts. Lenowisco is a good one down in Southwest Virginia. I think someone mentioned New River Valley Commission. They're also one of our PDDs. They actually get a separate pool of funding from ARC explicitly to help local communities develop grant applications that come to ARC. So I'd start with them. They're the main gateway to get to our grant funding, and they work in conjunction with the member states to who then receive the applications from you and the local development districts. And then
I think there's about 20 or 21, Chris, across the state. Something like that, like 20 or 21 different districts, I think, across the state.
That's right. That's about 20, I think 21, yeah, in Southwest Virginia. And so I would find the one that's nearest to you based on, they all serve a unique county footprint. So based on what county you're in, go to ARC's website, www.arc.gov, and you'll find the local development district that serves you, and just contact them, let them know what you're thinking of. I mentioned in the a comment I sent, I just forwarded to all panelists and attendees, that in addition to the funding that goes directly to Virginia, the area development allocation, there's a central pool of funding that run out of ARC headquarters called Power Initiative, and it's actually specifically targeted to coal impacted communities. So anyone planning a project with solar on an abandoned coal mine, that could be an ideal fit for this type of grant. It's usually a larger dollar award than our area development grants, meant to be more strategic, multi-county, multi-state. So I would definitely get in touch with either the local development districts or even directly with me about how to get ready for power maybe next year, because the application deadline's already passed for the power program this year, but that could really fit well with some of the people talking about abandoned mine land and solar.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else have they want to jump in?
I don't know if it has been mentioned, but the Central Appalachian Brownfield Innovation Network is also a nice a thing for you to plug in early on as well. I've seen people who do not have necessarily like a strong grasp of brownfield redevelopment. And one thing that I was surprised when I started working in brownfields was how everybody is so willing to share their best practices and share any hints and tips and tricks that they utilize to move and push their projects forward. So it's a great meeting of the minds, and it's a great, fun fair to kind of look at, the different resources available for, redeveloping on these contaminated sites. So that's what I.
Thanks, Gary. Absolutely. And let me try to bring Lora into the conversation because, your presentation is so relevant to the topic you guys are producing and curating, maintaining so many useful resources. And you get questions, I'm sure a lot of people calling saying, hey, I'm just diving in to this world. What do you recommend?
Well, I always recommend that people check out our training on our website. That would be a great first place to start. if you have a team of people who are new, or maybe they have different levels of expertise in different areas, which is often the case, if you direct all of them to take our training, then they'll all have a basis for all of the different expert areas. So that would be the first thing that I would recommend. And, the other thing is to reach out to the Repowering America's Lands Initiative contacts. We have all of our contacts are on the web. You can always connect with me, but if you're in a state or a community, there's likely a regional contact there for you. So that would be the second thing I would recommend.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And we've got a lot of great resources that we're compiling into the knowledge binder, including, I think, something from everybody, that all the beautiful faces that you see on the screen right now and the organizations and agencies that they represent. And they're, stay tuned. These are the folks to track because the work is ongoing and they're producing new things. And of course, innovation and technology can't be stopped at this point. So we're gonna have to refresh. It won't be Zoom next time. Well, we're gonna get back together in person in 2022. Stay tuned. Virginia Solar Summit 2022 is coming soon, and we had a lot of fun at the after hours last time, and we will again.
I got a question for Mead. So, Mead, you've been beating the drum on redevelopment and putting solar on landfill for lots of years. Why do you think now it's taken off after that drum beat you've been working on for a lot of years? What do you think's enabled this?
Pretty much everything we've talked about today, from the price of the panels decreasing significantly to the legislation that's been passed in Virginia, to Dominion's interest in it. And I think some of it also gets back to zoning and land use. We've seen some opposition to the larger projects, but I don't see a lot of opposition to some of the brownfield sites. As everybody's talked about there, some of them, in some cases, are pretty ugly. And there's certainly some ones out there that have been pretty much abandoned. And I think the best thing that could ever happen to them was the development of them as brownfields. So it's just finally the synergy has come together, the snowball, the crest, the wave, whatever you want to say. But it is a good thing. And some of it is our land is limited, and you hate to see the best ag land go for development. It works the same way with homes. Often the best ag land is the first to go for residential development or development. So that's why, when you see these type of programs and you see something like House Bill 1925 that Kilgore had sponsored, being out there to provide a fund, and let's hope we see some money put in it to help level the playing field. And it doesn't take much, but it does take a little bit. And that's what, Vince and I have both heard from the developers, is sometimes it just takes a little bit of money to get that due diligence type of work, to get that first bit of the snowball rolling, and then it can pick up on its own. I think local support, we need to get the local and county governments involved. And I think they're starting to realize the benefits of it from projects like the Bedford project that has the sheep grazing on it, and you can see it in Vince's background. So.
Yeah, I follow up a little bit on that. Paul, you've worked in a lot of states, that have done a lot of brownfields solar deployment. What other incentives out there, that have you seen really work to drive some of it? Because I keep hearing from solar developers, there needs to be some incentive to level the playing field. So what have other states done really well that maybe you could highlight here?
Incentives are great, Vince, but I will say one of the bigger things that helps here, brownfields or landfills, brownfields in particular, are owned by private companies. And the last thing they want is a phone call from the DEQ or the EPA that says that they got a problem. What they love to get, and frankly is an incentive, is frankly hearing from people like Mead and Lora that EPA and the DEQ want them to do this. It makes their life simpler to do easy things and profitable things that the DEQ and the EPA want them to do. So the message that gets out now that we're hearing loud and clear from this forum and elsewhere, that we'd really like you to take that old oil refinery, that old steel mill, that old coal plant, that old coal mine, et cetera, and we'd like you to reuse those power lines that have been sitting there idle for the last 10, 15 years and so forth. And all you have to do is let some Yahoo like me or some other developer go ahead in and use those assets, which is already there. It's a very powerful one. Frankly, we didn't hear that for a few years now in terms of, having the government sort of say, this is really what we want. It's coming through loud and clear right now, and it's helpful. We have several projects that are in the state of Virginia that I'm not allowed to talk about, where companies are now getting the message that it is a good thing from a long-term site utilization point of view, and the state would look favorably on them reusing their sites this way. And it's a great feeling right now.
Thanks, Paul. That's perfect. And I'm sensitive to the top of the hour. We're not going to quit right now, but I just want to draw everyone's attention. We have 10 minutes. There is no official wrap session today, so we're just going to continue to take questions. But hearing what Paul just said made me think of something else, and then we can go as high level as you want. But another kind of what's different now that's emerging is ESG. So it's Wall Street basically deciding that we're never going to invest in a dirty project ever again. If it doesn't check our environmental box or our governance box, our community box, ESG means governance. There's a lot of things you can kind of think about within the world of ESG, but it's kind of raising this minimum investment standard. And I think that that's not a trend that's going to go away anytime soon. Virginia's already been a leader in corporate power for many years. And so it's very encouraging to see all these, in Ghostbusters, you're not supposed to cross the streams, but that's exactly what's happening here. And we're about to, melt the giant marshmallow man of brownfield redevelopment that we've been waiting for. And obviously I couldn't be more stoked.
I think that's a great segue to maybe invite Katie into the conversation around corporate buyers and what they're asking for pollinator smart programs. We heard about this a little bit in our DMME summer webinar series last year in, I think it was July of 2020, around what companies like Bank of America are putting in their RFPs. Katie, do you have any more information on that?
Well, so we actually haven't seen a ton of that quite yet in Virginia, but I have seen the Bank of America talk you're referring to. Microsoft is another company that's done that. But again, I think they mostly danced around Virginia. It's like sites in Pennsylvania and Maryland and not quite here. There might be one or two, but I'm not sure. The requirements, it's kind of interesting because the way that requirements, if a corporate buyer or a locality was interested in stipulating it, the wording would be very important. Saying, passing the scorecard with the Virginia Pollinator Smart Program would have a way to ensure that they're certified. Saying that, the developer will incorporate pollinator species does not necessarily equate to the Virginia Pollinator Smart Program. And so it kind of depends on what the buyer is looking to achieve. The Virginia Pollinator Smart Program's goal is to provide high quality habitat and as much of it as possible while also being feasible for people to do. So I would encourage participation in the program or wording language that would ask for participation in the program. And it's a valuable resource with great guidelines. But honestly, there's also, the side of us that just wants to see more native species in the ground, and any kind of habitat is good habitat as long as native plants are used. So it could really go any way. And I'm a little biased since I'm part of the Virginia Pollinator Smart Program, but I would suggest language that explicitly refers to our program and the scorecard.
Thanks, Katie. And then I wanted to maybe add on to something said a few moments ago around kind of what is hopefully going to open up the market for more development in this space. And I think we heard that this morning from John Hillis from Sol UNESCO that having that clarity in the DEQ permit by rule regulatory language is really helpful. And previously it was not super clear. It was in there, but it was like not, 100% certainty for the developer around what is the permit requirement for brownfields. And going forward, that regulatory language is out for public comment right now. So we'll hear about this more, I think it's either tomorrow or Thursday, more about the PBR reg process, but it's open for public comment. And I would say if that's an important piece for people to, comment positively on that in the public process, and make sure that it, stays in there and is adopted and that certainty is well known.
Yeah, the Brownfields program, we've been working through that whole process with our folks in the permit by rule group, and we are going to continue to coordinate on that exemption and how that's applied, and down to asking me, is this a brownfield site? That sort of coordination. So that'll continue with our programs going forward. You're going to hear a lot about the DEQ permitting in different ways tomorrow, and then there's hang-ups. It's not all easy, and we'll get those on the table tomorrow. But there's going to be increased coordination in DEQ on this in this space.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. That's exactly where I wanted to go, because I would be remiss if I was just all sunshine and unicorns today. As we've already identified throughout the program, this is some of the most sophisticated work that carbon-based life forms are capable of on planet Earth, and it's not so easy. And that's okay. We want to check all the boxes. We want to maximize this land boom, as we started out talking about. And how are we going to do it right? What's the saying about how are we going to do it right? Do it twice and we can't do it right. Oh, I butchered that, sorry. But I'm getting tired. It's been such a big day, and I want to let you all go. I'm sensitive to your time. We have a hard stop at the top of the hour, but tomorrow we're going to dig into even more beef. You've all been, you're all a little bit smarter now, thanks to our stellar lineup of stars, and you're ready for more. We're going to ratchet it up. We're going to dial it up and dig into some of this fantastic detail with more beef, more steak, more sizzle on solar redevelopment in Virginia, Greater Virginia, and everywhere on our beautiful planet. I want to thank everyone who has stuck the whole day with us. I certainly want to thank our stars for bringing the gas so late in the day, knocking down these questions, and kudos to all the work that you're doing. Bravo. I hope that people are a little bit more, maybe not quite as hopeful as I am, but a little bit more hopeful that we have some of the tools and some of the resources and some of the people and some of the right places, thinking about some of the right things, even the problems, to get this work done right. And I'm really faithful that.
And get your coffee early tomorrow, because our 8:15 keynote is definitely worth tuning in right away. Don't miss that one. It's going to be great. It's going to set the tone for the day. So, everybody get some rest, start happy hour now so you can finish early.
Yep. Last time we always try to do bacon and Brightfields early in the morning. I promise we'll do it next time. Get your own bacon. We'll get started early back on Brightfields again. And don't forget your profiler. Do your profiles for the knowledge binder. Get your questions in overnight. We're going to award the best questions today. You're going to get free tickets for the next event in 2022 in person, which means your bacon will be on us. And t-shirts. We're making official Virginia Solar Summit t-shirts, and winners of the best questions each day will also receive amazing t-shirts. With that, we're going to wrap just a little bit early. I'm starving. I hope everybody is able to recharge overnight, pun intended, and we'll be back just a little bit early tomorrow morning, 8:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time for Ms. Kelly Speaks Bachman, the Biden administration joining forces live with the Commonwealth of Virginia's own Matthew Strickler, who is the Secretary of Natural Resources. Again, I really want to thank especially all of our sponsors, but our co-hosts, DEQ, DMME, the Brownfields Assistance Center, West Virginia, as well as Appalachian Voices. Shout out EPA, shout out DOE, TAB, Terawatt sponsor BQ Energy, and Ms. Lora Strine at Repowering America's Land. Katie Cyrus, VHP, also a sponsor. Thank you, and all the important work you're doing. She's wearing multiple hats over there. And Mr. Mead Anderson, Vince Maiden, Carey Hearn, Nick, all the people at the state of Virginia. I don't know what they've done to recruit all these great stars. But now that I said that, other states might be trying to steal them away, but they've got some great people over there, difference makers. And I think that's why we see Virginia stepping out so boldly, so strongly, so robustly, ready to kind of start to really roll the sleeves up and scale into this work, this solar redevelopment renaissance. So thanks again. Top of the hour. Vince, 30
Take
seconds.
care.
Yep. All right. The future's as bright as we build it.
Take care.
All right. See you bright and early tomorrow.